It works.
We're running. Okay, I'm gonna open the hearing. It's a legislative hearing for the preservation and removal of tree zoning text amendments. If you'd like to testify, please provide your name and address, whether you wish to be notified of the decision and whether you wish to be notified. Does anyone wish to speak at the hearing? Anyone on Zoom wish to speak? Raise your hand. Icon. Seeing none. Do any of the counselors need to disclose or abstain from participating on the matter because of a possible financial gain from the act?
No.
No? Any challenges to impartiality from the audience? Anyone on Zoom? Seeing none. Chad, will you read the staff report for us, please?
I will, and I will actually get this started a little bit, but we also have Garrett Phillips here today, our planner, and he's been taking the lead on this one. So Garrett is actually going to do the presentation for us.
Okay, that's great. Sorry, Garrett, I didn't put your name and your picture on my calendar of recognized.
Thank you. If you would like me to provide more details, such as actually reading the staff report, please interrupt me and ask me to do so. I'm going to give you a more brief overview of what's presented here and the history of how it came to be here today. So the proposed amendments to the Gearhart zoning ordinance that are before you are the result of discussions at several public planning commission meetings throughout the course of 2023 that I attended in the capacity of the consulting planner for the city of Gearhart. My understanding is that these discussions have even more history than that, going back into 2022. The planning commission decided that they wanted to have this series of discussions to address several issues. In the end, they narrowed the scope and focus of the proposed zoning ordinance text amendments to address what I would say are three issues. One is the purpose, the first purpose is to provide more information to staff and planning commissioners on authorized tree cutting activity that's happening throughout the city of Gearhart. When neighbors or residents cut down trees, it's very common for neighbors to call in to staff or call planning commissioners that they know and ask, hey, is this legal? What's happening in my neighborhood? Should they be cutting down these trees? Should they have gotten a permit? And it's very common based on the status quo in the zoning code and what's required of everyone for staff to not have enough information to be able to efficiently answer those questions. A second one is to collect more information on tree cutting activity to inform potential future policy decisions around how the city wants to manage its forest. And the third is that there's a few changes proposed to the tree cutting regulations that are really aimed at just making it a little bit simpler for residents to work through the permit process and demonstrate to the city that like we do need to cut down these trees and it's a reasonable thing to do, and to be efficient for them to get a permit to do that. So the overall effect of the proposed amendments is that there would be a permit required for any resident to cut down a tree within the city of Gearhart that meets a certain minimum size threshold. That's always been the case, and the size threshold is not changing. And in the past, you only had to get a permit if you wanted to cut down more than 5 trees. And the planning commission would issue that permit rather than a staff person at City Hall. And an applicant would have to go and have a hearing before the Planning Commission, where the public could weigh in on whether or not 5 or more trees could be cut on their property. That would continue to be the case, but with the proposed amendments, if you want to cut down 1 tree, 2 trees, 3 trees, or 4 trees, you go to City Hall, fill out an application form. That essentially the purpose of that is to notify staff that you're doing it, and to notify staff of the number of trees you're cutting down, and then staff issue a permit, and you go on and cut your trees down. And if any neighbors call in and ask questions about whether that's allowed, there's a clear record of it. It's easy to answer, yes, that was permitted. And then if someone wants to cut down more than that, there's also a record of how many have already been cut. That's the main effect of what's proposed. And the staff report goes into a little bit more detail on the history of those discussions and a couple of other minor edits. For example, how the diameter, or how the size of a tree is measured. So again, as I was referring to before, there's some trees that are small enough that you could cut down as many as you want without needing a permit, and that's going to continue to be the case. But trees that meet this certain size threshold, you have to get a permit for it. And one of the proposed amendments is changing the way we measure a tree from being the diameter, which is hard for a layperson to measure, to the circumference. So you could, tie a rope around a tree and then hold that rope measurement up to a yardstick, for example. And so that's the basic proposal. The staff report also reviews several procedural requirements. For example, that we were required to have a public hearing before the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission did hold a public hearing in November on the proposed amendments. And there was no public testimony for or against. The Planning Commissioners ultimately, at the end of that hearing, voted to recommend that we come forward to City Council and have a hearing here, which is required as well before adopting the amendments. As the City Council, the authority is ultimately yours on whether or not to approve them. Leading up to this hearing, in response to the public notice that we issued, we have still not gotten any public comments on the proposed amendments. So far, no public comment one way or the other, despite the lengthy Planning Commission discussions that took place throughout last year. So going forward, following tonight's hearing, a few different options that you have would be to, one option is to recommend that staff bring forth a final ordinance to make the amendments official, and that would happen at a later City Council meeting. A second option is to say that you don't want the amendments to happen at all, and to put an end to this discussion by recommending that the amendments not be adopted. And a third option, which you might call middle ground, is if you're interested in exploring some issue related to these amendments in more detail, is you could one, either keep the hearing open, requesting more information from staff and the Planning Commission for a later date where the hearing would remain open until a later City Council date, or you can send the proposed amendments back to the Planning Commission for them to work on it some more, hopefully with some direction on what you're interested in having them work on. What else is there to say? The two primary criteria that we have to consider when deciding whether or not to approve these are related to the comprehensive plan and basically the public interest and public need. So, you have as a city council, this is a legislative decision. You have wide latitude in making your decision. But the decision does need to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. And it does need to satisfy a public need. And so the staff report reviews why there's a public need for the proposed amendments, including providing some basic information on the public goods and services that trees provide and why a city has an interest in managing its trees and understanding how many trees are being removed from its forest. And the staff report goes on to review elements of the comprehensive plan, which the primary conclusion in the staff report is that the comprehensive plan doesn't have a lot to say about this, and that the proposed amendments are, in our opinion, consistent with the comprehensive plan. So the things that we were really looking out for there were sections in the comprehensive plan related to natural resources. So the goal 5 chapter, and we were looking for any references to trees, forestry, and like I said, natural resources. And so the conclusion of the staff report is that it's the planning commission's and staff's assessment that the proposed amendments satisfy a public need and are consistent with the plan, and that you have a basis for approving the amendments. The staff report has the actual amendments attached to them, and I'll be here throughout the meeting to answer any questions that you have. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you, Garrett.
Garrett, I have a question. I have two
Sure.
questions. Preston Devereaux, okay? Number one, what designates a forest?
When I referred to the forest, I was referring generally to all of the trees in the city. So it's just that the city government has an interest in how the trees within the city are managed.
Okay, and then two, the way that I read through this thing here, 5 or more trees would be like if you bought a lot that had trees on it and you wanted to develop a home site, you'd have to come to the city and get permission to clear the trees for your home site, your septic field and everything else. Is that correct?
That's correct.
No,
No.
that's
The
not
code-
correct.
Well,
Garrett, if you look at 8C, it does not apply to tree removal in order to construct proposed improvements, including the placement of structures on site, sewage, disposal facilities, access ways, utilities, need to make essential grade changes or other authorized activities. And that tracks with state law. So if you're developing a parcel, you need to be able to clear the trees necessary to construct all the improvements, and that includes utilities. That would include the drive, ingress, egress, all of that. And so there could be 100 trees on it. And if that's in the building envelope, driveway envelope, everything else, that would be specifically exempted from this. If there were other trees on the site that did not include any of the I'll just call it improvement envelope, and in that I'm talking about septic, building, driveway, garage, everything, power, water, then I think that if it was less than 5, you could cut them. If it's more than 5, then it would probably be prudent to bring it to the planning commission. But as far as improvements go, this doesn't impact them.
Well, doesn't that fall underneath, I mean, when you apply for the building permit?
Yeah, and so our thought process is that it is a permit, but it's one that's garnered through the building process. And when a builder brings in a set of plans, they show a plot, they'll mark the trees, show us where their septic and their home is going to be. And then we deal with it that way. So it is a permitting process, if you will. We'll know about it prior to cutting. But after this, I think that if anybody is cutting any tree for any reason, it would take some sort of permit, either a building permit or a minor or a major.
So what happens, I mean, basically everything, you know, west of 101 here is mostly short pines, okay? Those are really brittle. I mean, after 25 to 30 years, you know, they either break off or, you know, so that creates a hazard if your tree falls over on your neighbor's fence or something like that. If you got, I mean, if you're down where Robert Lee lives, 8th Street, you got those big spruce trees. The windstorm comes up, I mean, you guys saw it, 07 storm. I mean, he's got a huge liability if that tree falls on his neighbor's property, so how do we deal with that?
Oh, gentlemen, can we stop the discussion and just go through, and at the end, we can have a discussion and deliberation in the order of business, okay? I just would like to have the proponents and opponents who aren't here, so we can move through, and
When you want us to ask questions.
at the end where it goes, I close the public hearing and we move on to deliberations and discussion. That's all I'm asking, is postpone any more discussion until then. All right, so that's the staff report from Garrett. Proponents, anyone on Zoom who's a proponent wishing to speak? Seeing none in the audience, we move to
There is.
proponents
Oh,
or opponents? Proponents, okay.
language issues.
Like, thank you.
I tried.
All right, so, since you weren't here at the very beginning, please give us your name and address.
I'm Bob Carson. I live at 226 Ridge Drive, and what I was going to say has been quite changed by listening to answers to questions. First of all, I want to applaud you for having a tree ordinance. Many towns do not. Gerhardt has a huge variety of trees, from the old growth Sitka spruce to native lodgepole or shore pines, which incidentally, many of them live beyond 30 or 35 years. I've got 7 in my yard that were planted in 1995, and they're all very healthy and growing. We have exotic trees like Norfolk Island pines from South America, eucalyptus trees from Australia. Shannon is going to pass out a list of, or you already have a list of some of the trees in Walla Walla. Shannon and I have just begun to research that. We have beautiful trees like holly trees, even though they happen to be exotic. As you know, trees provide habitat, shade on hot days, beauty, and strong wind buffers. Yes, occasionally one will blow down. Most importantly, they are carbon storage for the Earth's greatest problem, which I think you probably realize is global climate change. So although I applaud your trying to save more trees in Gerhardt, I think you have to ask the question, do you want a town with homes everywhere, or with one with a lower density of homes and lots of green space? There are plenty of places in the city of Gerhardt that are either grasslands or have small trees that can be developed. So why should any place that has a forest in it be clear cut for a home? I also think that the distance from creeks and estuaries should be increased from 50 feet to 100 feet. In some towns that are greater than that, those types of places are a lot better for trees than they are for homes. As I've said here many times before, for low places next to the estuaries or water saturated, fine grained, organic rich sediment and will be the first places to settle and get inundated and shook apart during the tsunami which will come. I think that ought to be 100 feet minimum instead of 50 feet. I also think that the circumference should be 19 inches. It should be half of what you said. There are not that many trees in Gerhardt that have more than 19 inches or more than a 38-inch circumference, so I think we need to save them. I also think that the neighbors should not know after the trees have been cut down that they're being cut down. They need to be known in advance. Somebody needs to post signs within 200 feet of where they're gonna be cut down for people to see. It's not gonna be any good for a neighbor to call the city and, oh yeah, they got a permit. I also think that in most cases, it should not be a single person. I realize that would be more work for a committee, but I just don't think it's wise to have a single person giving out tree permits. Finally, I want to say that it's okay if we have lots of permits because if we require permits, because you still have the option of saying yes or no. But again, any tree over 19 inches, and any, even a single tree, I think should require a permit. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Dan,
Can I give my handouts before I start my time?
I don't know.
I have two. Okay,
Oh, you got the handout.
yeah,
I thought we got the one.
so that's from somebody else.
One each to everybody.
Yes, they're
3 pages.
just nice aerial maps to give a visual as well as, I can go that way. Yeah. Oh, hi, people back. All right. So where's the, I'll stand up where it was.
Thank you. This is going your way.
I should have put north, south, east, west on them, but forgive me. Some of them are up.
Some of us can see where the
Yeah, I
west
think we
is.
can figure
Yeah, I
out.
think the ocean indicates a good direction.
You can tell by the golf course.
That too.
Okay,
All right,
name and address, please.
Shannon Smith, 774 Pacific Way, Gerard, Oregon, right down the way. All right. I brought you two different handouts today. Thank you for, I tried to actually email them earlier. One thing I will note is Robin Lane, a resident of Second Street, did email with feedback about the trees. So if that didn't get into the notation that there was public comment, there is public comment, so
We'll search for that.
they. What I brought tonight are two different things, none are all presented, city council. There's 3 aerial maps I brought to you tonight. I've been in contact since, 2 years ago with the Department of State Lands. Our former state land wetlands gentleman was named Dan Carey, who knew our area very well. He's been replaced by a woman named Katie Blombeck. She's fantastic. She worked with all Columbia River conservation projects, knows wetlands protection, tidal streams very, very well. She's been here to the area, Dan trained her, so she's up to speed. What I learned from Katie and from Dan is that we have a really special environment here in Gerhardt that is quite unusual compared with many of our other cities down the coast. If you look at the first map, which is the big estuary, you can orient for where our Mechanic estuary is. The second map shows you an overview. And forgive me for being a little bit grainy, but you can see both the Mechanicum and the Neawana that go through Seaside. And on our side, to the north, our creek is green. Along the creek on both sides, well, mostly the western side, are the ancient Sitka spruce. And they were able to survive here and maintain here through the 100-degree or hundreds of mile-per-hour storms through Columbus Day, all the different storms that have hit the earth, because they're behind this dune. And the roots of them are, down deep as you can be, into many of the wetlands that, again, are line the creek. It is a special environment. So the terminology that the state uses is called aquatic resources special concern. It is different than wetlands. It means it's a special forest environment. And these trees here are a really unique special forest environment. The trees that line this section, particularly right back here, I'm pointing to the north, are probably 500, 600-year-old trees. Anyone who's lived there a long time remembers the Clutchie Creek tree out there that was, 800 years old, I think. Ours are probably 500, if not more. I have pictures in the 1930s of the barn showing almost the exact standard trees. They're actually thicker now than they were in the 1930s, 100 years later. So we have a distinction different than the town next door of having a protected zone of really old growth forest that is for wildlife and for healthy water and for protection from tsunami, et cetera, for other water. That's just completely different. If you go down the coast, I actually went through town by town by town, you have to go down to like Manzanita or south of Cannon Beach before you find this in-town experience of old growth trees with this size and this mature forest and the creek that runs along it. We have beaver, otter, blue heron, and all the other owls and critters that are just amazing. So building in this section is impacting a resource that is priceless.
1 minute.
I've been on 2nd Street, 4th and 5th Street, and on down 9th and 10th, I think Lynn Brigham has a series of lots for sale. Building in these locations involves putting, testing your septic holes to get approvals. 2nd Street got approvals even though they were denied 3 times. They actually hired a private guy to come and finally get them approvals. Nothing in the area behind my property should be built upon. I flood every year, even though I've been filled in the 1930s. So it's really an area that would be tough for building anyway. But the bigger thing is to preserve it for generations to come. It's like nothing else. And if you go up the way, you won't find this stand of trees with this magnificence almost anywhere. So it's incredibly special. And we can take advantage of it in preserving it and being the heroes that actually preserve things for our kids' future and our good health. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more proponents in the audience? Okay, any proponents on Zoom that wish to speak? Seeing no raised hands, of course, I'm limited by 1 picture. Correct. All right, any opponents in the audience? Any opponents on Zoom? Seeing none, is there any neutral testimony? Anyone wishing to be heard with neutral testimony? On Zoom, anyone with a raised hand? Okay, with that, I'm closing the hearing. We now will go, Preston, to discussion and deliberation. Thank you for indulging me.
Well, my concern is that people, that have got these full sick of spruce and, just to be clear, the spruce along the river there and everything like that, they don't have a deep root system. Okay, they have a wide root system, so when they blow over, they take a lot of earth with them, right? I'm just concerned about people that have existing trees and spruce. I logged for 10 years. You go to cut something like that down and 9 times out of 10, it's rotten on the inside. So it does create a hazard. And it's like the elk issue, okay? If you go down the highway and you run into an elk, that's your problem. If the elk tears somebody's fences down that has livestock and you run into one of their livestock, that's their problem. So I'm just concerned about the people, the citizens, the property owners who have these big trees that everybody's gonna get up in arms about if they see some guy coming and cutting them down, even though it's a safety issue. So that's all, that's my concern.
Okay. Okay, anyone else want to discussion, deliberation?
I have questions, more than discussion, and I think maybe those should wait until we go to vote later.
Okay,
Madam Council, we're not bringing an ordinance to you at the moment.
Okay.
Yes,
So
this
then I
is,
will go
you're
back.
going to give us instructions to move forward with the ordinance as written, or make any changes that you may
Okay.
see, or to vary it, or to not do anything at all.
Okay.
Not vary it, excuse
And I
me.
don't want to jump the line, please, cool.
but we have it on our list under new business
Yeah.
for discussion. So is this discussion we're having now for this ordinance, and we're not gonna put it on new business?
So.
And we can just decide to say, go ahead,
You
or
can do
not?
both. You can discuss at this moment if you choose, and to discuss any of the questions and things that may have come out. Later in the agenda, again, there's another discussion opportunity for you as well. I think that's a little confusing on the sheet that I gave you.
Yes.
But in this point, you can have two discussions.
Right, we could go for it and then we can change our mind and say no.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so. Would you like to ask any questions now so you can think about it?
Yes,
Okay, then let's ask some questions.
sure.
Sharon, please ask away.
Okay, Garrett, thanks for being here. Question on the last, 2 pages of the packet of your report that we were given is a very small handwriting where comments have been made, I presume, by the planning commission. And my question is, well, one of my questions is that the existing ordinance that you put on there? I was a little confused about that.
One moment, please. I'm just trying to find the handwriting.
But it's not handwritten, but it's box comments.
Okay,
Oh, you have handwriting on yours.
No, that's my handwriting.
Okay.
But it's
So
the,
you're talking about the box comments on the right?
yeah,
Yeah, the typed box comments, right side.
okay. Let's see, so.
I'm looking for you as well.
You're wondering if it's part of the same thing?
no, my first question is, are those 2 pages the existing ordinance that they worked
No.
on?
Okay, so I will say that further towards the beginning of the packet is Exhibit A, which is the final proposed amendments. And what you might say then on it is the 9th page of the packet, Exhibit A, which has the red line deletions and insertions. This is the existing ordinance, but with all changes there for you to see as well. So if you want to look at the existing ordinance, look at Exhibit A with the red strike throughs and red underlines on it that begins on page 9.
Okay, that's not my question. My question is, the last 2 pages of the packet, what is that? Is that also the existing ordinance? Because there's a discrepancy in the tree measurement between the red lined information and the tree circumference included in the last 2 pages. So in the last 2 pages, it says 30 inches circumference, 30, 30. In the red line ordinance and elsewhere, it keeps saying 38. So my question is, where did the 38 come from as opposed to the 30?
Okay, so the last 2 pages is part of an interim draft that the Planning Commission was considering. And what I'm going to do right now is look at the actual Gearhart zoning ordinance posted online to confirm to you what the current ordinance says the measurement is. If
Okay,
And
I'm gonna tell you that the preservation and removal of trees, according to my zoning ordinance amendments through 2020. Definition B says, tree is defined as follows: any tree greater than 12 inches in diameter is measured at 4½ feet above the existing grade. And that is the thing that caught my eye, is that we're on 38 inches. And in this paper, at the very bottom under 6B under definition, it says 30 inches in circumference or 4½ feet at grade. So
I believe
we have to have consistency any way we look at it. And if it's already written in our definition, in our zoning code, and we're changing something else, though this could be under 6.070.
If I can interject, I think her simple question is, at one point you're saying 30 inches, and then when the final proposal comes to us, or somewhat final proposal comes to us, it's been changed from 30 to 38, and I think that's what she's concerned about, is how to, there's no apparent discussion, how do we get from 38 to 30?
okay, can I
Whatever it was, sorry.
okay, so in the Gearhart zoning ordinance last updated March 2021, the definition is that any tree greater than 12 inches in diameter is a tree. And that I believe corresponds to 38 inches in circumference.
Well, 12 inches would be
So-
30 inches approximately.
it is,
Approximately 38.
yeah, it's 37.7.
3.14159.
I just did the math, and so a 12-inch diameter is 37.7 inches in circumference. So rather than measuring through where the tree is not in diameter, where it's not, this blue copy here is a working copy, it's a draft, it's no longer valid. That is not being considered. The one that
Okay,
we were
that's not
considering
that's not
was
my
this one
question.
here.
That's not my question. My
So
question is, this is the working copy, and it says 30 inches. What transpired that it went from 30 inches to 38 inches?
I think 30 inches was a throw-in before we did the math. And then we did the math and found that the circumference should actually be larger.
Well, the comment says changed measurements, covers somewhat smaller trees than before. That's the comment that's next to it. So was that changed in the planning commission discussion? I'm just wondering how it went from the 30, which was proposed, to the 38 that's in the corrected document. That's my question.
Yeah, I can so the planning commission considered a wide range of potential changes to the zoning ordinance adopted March of 2021 throughout their meetings last year, and ultimately narrowed the scope of changes down to a really relatively limited set of the total universe of potential changes they talked about. And so at one point, yes, they considered changing the definition of tree so that smaller trees would be included. More trees that are smaller would need to get permitted for cutting. And like many other potential changes they contemplated, they decided not to pursue them. And just to be clear, what's proposed in the proposed amendments is not a substantial or really material change from the existing ordinance that City Council approved in March of 2021. So yes, the Planning Commission talked about this, changing the size of trees that fall in the definition. They talked about a variety of other potential changes, but ultimately decided not to recommend going ahead with those.
Okay, so what you're saying, it was a discussion process and a conscious decision. It's not a discrepancy in the documents or anything. That's what I hear you saying.
Correct. Yeah, it was the result of deliberation and planning commission meetings. If you'd like us to be more precise with the measurement, as you pointed out, 12 inches diameter is not exactly 38 inches circumference. So there is a slight change in the tree size being proposed here, of about a 1/4 inch circumference, but we can be
Okay,
more precise.
thank you. I have a couple other questions for you. In that same proposed document, and I think it carries over into the red line document, it talks about the planning commission may grant or deny a request for tree removal. And I'm wondering what that process would be. So would the property owner, I'm just trying to get a feel for what that would look like. So the property owner would take that to the planning commission, or the city manager would take it to the planning commission? I just was wondering what that process would be.
Sure. So when someone wants to cut down enough trees that planning commission approval is required, just like if they wanted to cut down one tree that meets the definition of tree, they'll fill out an application form that staff are going to create, that will have their basic information about what they want to do. Staff will then schedule a planning commission meeting, and there'll be a deliberation, based over the criteria and the facts of the case. And that the only thing that's changing from the past in that regard is that there's actually going to be an application form, which in the past we haven't had one. And that's really it. I mean, the goal is that there'll be more information to consider, because staff will actually know whether trees have been cut already in the prior 12 months. It should lead to the process being a little bit more orderly, but.
Okay, Karen. Are we gonna have a discussion now, or are we gonna have it later? I'm still.
We're going to have it later.
Okay.
We bring it. Any other questions?
Okay, I have a question for you. I don't see in any of the comments, and was there any discussion about, well, I see that you made some exceptions for emergency situations, but they require the city administrator to be available for them. So I have a concern. We have a winter storm on weekend, and he's out of town, and I have a tree that is damaged severely, about to come down on my house or nearly felled, whatever. I don't see that this legally gives an exception to where I can take emergency steps without the city manager or city administrator being available. That kind of concerns me. So I'm just gonna say that, hold on to that thought. Number two, this is a question. Was there any cost analysis as far as staff time, how much we're now going to put more burden on the staff to review all of these? And then you've also removed the requirement that they get an actual arborist to come in and make a decision on what's a diseased tree and what's not. which means that we are now open to more possible litigation down the road. Was there any kind of cost analysis done as part of the discussion?
So there was no cost analysis done. There's a few parts to your question. I just answered the last part as clearly as I could there. So the first part of the question is that the proposed ordinance does not differ from the one adopted in March of 2021 in terms of what it requires people to do when there's a hazardous or dangerous tree. So we're not making it. This doesn't make it harder than it was before to cut down a hazardous or dangerous tree. Yes, you're supposed to get approval from the city. You know, I don't think it's anyone's intention to make people second guess correcting an imminently hazardous situation. Perhaps the ordinance, the proposed ordinance could be improved to be more clear about that. So we're definitely, listening to your comments in that regard. When it comes to cost analysis of staff time, again, there was no analysis done. My understanding from the Planning Commission's discussions, which staff participated in, is that they seemed to confidently feel that it was just a clear-cut matter, that it would make it would reduce the amount of time they have to spend addressing public concerns about neighbors cutting down trees if they had a permit record that the tree cutter had come in and gotten approval to do it. But no analysis was done.
Okay, well, I'll save any further comment I have on that for our discussion. So my next question is about the determination, the definition that you have of a tree, whether it's 38 inches or whether it's 30 inches. I think I am the perfect person to read through this and tell you where there's a problem with this and that. I don't know that much about trees. And when I first moved here and bought some property, I had some trees that I thought were diseased. I had a tree that I definitely knew was dead. I didn't know if I could take it down or not. I looked at the tree ordinance as it stood with the 12 inches in diameter. And my question was, can you stand up? I need a visual. You're gonna stand up. We're gonna do it. You're my tree. You're my tree. Okay, you're my trunk. This is your branch. 4 feet off the ground, am I measuring just this, or am I measuring this? Oh, is that a tree? Yeah. Or is this the tree? So I think that we need to clean up that language. I think there needs to be some more discussion on that, because I have bought trees in the past that I was told were trees and apparently looked very much like trees to me, but they also had a bush-like growing structure. So I think that we need to be a little bit more clear about whether we're talking about a trunk or the largest branch or whatever would be the best verbiage or terminology for that. I think it could be a little bit more clear for people like me who don't understand a lot about trees. The next thing is I'm gonna share with you, I have a very serious concern about removing. I've always felt like an arborist needs to be part of this process in many instances, especially in the more than one tree, when your justification for removing more than one tree is that your trees are diseased. I don't know a lot about trees. Now, I've spent some time with Chad, walking around looking at trees and talking about trees, and he seems to know a lot about trees, but I still don't think he's an expert on trees. And I think that if we remove our ability to rely on an expert to weigh in and give us an opinion, I think that we are opening the city up to a lot of problems, and as particularly we're not going to be standing on very firm ground when it comes to defending our position if we remove a requirement that an arborist do it. And my concern with that is twofold, but most importantly, it's protecting the citizens and their money I don't think that a city should spend a lot of money defending that somebody had a diseased tree, which is what that process would require. There's a lot of city staff involvement, which means money coming out of our taxpayers. I think the obligation for that should fall on the person who wants to remove the tree. So I have no problem with an arborist. And in fact, I actually think that that could be a very good part of due process. And then one more comment that I have one more comment. And then Mr. Carson, do you know how many of you did this inventory?
Yes, Jen and I did that.
I don't know very much about trees. I do know that we do have a problem here in our town with some invasive species type things. Are any of the trees on this list invasive species?
Holly is, but
Okay.
it's
Hawthorns are also.
beautiful and people like it.
Right, but some versions of hawthorn are also invasive, and by invasive, we mean that they could be detrimental to the rest of the trees or other trees in the environment. So, when we're cleaning up our wording here, I think that we need to address also the ability to remove trees that are invasive. Because you know, as much as people might like holly, I don't want a holly in my particular yard. And if somebody were to plant one in the next door neighbor, I'd have a problem with that. And I think if we're gonna attack this and we have an opportunity to clean this up and make it better for us, I think we should address all of that kind of stuff.
Few of them are more than 6 inches in diameter. Holly's pretty small. If I could say 2 more quick things. The standard measurement of the diameter of a tree is a breast height. It's called DBH. And you are right that some trees change diameter rapidly, but that's a standard definition. And I thought of something else, but I already forgot it. Thank you. Oh, I think you said that the landowner should pay for the arborist if he or she thinks it's diseased, but it's not obvious to everybody else.
Anything else?
No, that's it. I'll save everything else for discussion.
Anyone else? Or comments, discussion, deliberation? I close the hearing. All right. I'm going to open the city council meeting for January 3rd, 2024. I hope everyone has a great and wonderful 2024. City of Gerhart deserves it. All right. Any conflict of interest from any of the councilors?
No, no, sir.
Okay, thanks a lot. All right, moving on. Approval of the minutes. The regular meeting on December 6, 2023. Can I have a motion? Can I have any corrections?
I move that we approve the meetings from the regular meeting of the city council Wednesday, December 6th.
Second that.
I've got a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, passes. Now, the work session for December 12th, 2023. A motion,
I move that we approve the work session for the Garrett City Council on Tuesday, December 12th, 2023.
I'll second.
any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes. There's nothing on the planning commission report. They didn't meet. Mayor's report. I'm gonna have the city council are going to have a town hall on, is it Thursday, the 23rd?
It is, sir. Tuesday, the 23rd.
Tuesday, the 23rd at 3 o'clock. We're gonna discuss the emergency services building. Possibly some land acquisition And so everyone's invited to come to City Hall, council chambers, and bring your ideas. Because this is a serious town hall and we're gonna have several more coming up. And I'm also looking for some volunteers to help design signs for Gearhart.
All over that.
Okay, you can email me at mayorsmith@cityofgearhart.com. And I'll be in touch. I'd like to move as quickly as possible with these signs and the fonts and whatever else you call signs for.
And the purpose of this would be for
Everything in Gearhart.
a new brand.
That it's just making Gearhart uniform and bringing in, you know, the ridge path, our pathways down to the ocean, everything like that. All right.
Tennis courts.
Tennis courts, pickleball. Whatever else. The parks. Yep. Whatever we've got, we need signs for.
Standardized.
Standardized and, thank you, professional. Not like the mayor. Council reports, Preston,
Nothing.
Rita,
Well, after the last city council meeting, the bench committee met with Chad to see what we could do to hurry up this process, and I'm sure he has a lot to say about it. And that's my report.
okay. And then we'll go on to Dana.
Actually, this has been a relatively quiet month for me. I helped with reviewing the employee handbook, answered emails, and, I am going to be attending the next League Board of Small Cities meeting in Bay City on February 2nd. We are also gearing up and looking forward to, planning for our holidays next summer, trying to establish appointments with, or meetings with the state to talk about what we can do to make things better than they were last year, building on what we did last year.
All right. Sharon,
Chad and I met via computer with two representatives from the Oregon Parks Department regarding the benches on the dunes. They gave Chad a list of things that they wanted to obtain from him. They sounded fairly positive about us being able to put more benches out there, which is what we'd like to do, and also perhaps moving the benches that are out there a little closer, all of which is gonna be on their property, pretty much. The elk situation, I had a meeting with Pam Webb, who's one of the Clatsop County Commissioners. And updated her on what has happened with the Gerhardt herd. And everything that we have done so far regarding that. I also was one of 4 people to testify in front of the Fish and Wildlife Commissioners in December. We just were visitors speaking. My impression was that perhaps went in one ear and out the other. They did have a representative, their wildlife representative, Brian Wolford, got up and spoke for about 10 minutes, and I think that they probably listened more to him than to us, whatever. And then lastly, elk sightings in Gerhardt. I've had multiple reports of people seeing 4 or 5, a group of 4 or 5 elk in central Gerhardt. And I've also had 2 to 3 reports of approximately 16 elk being seen in the vicinity of the Seaside Airport. We're not done with the elk question. There is a group of people who are pursuing that. That's all.
Okay, is Sergeant Ian here?
He is not. He
Okay.
texted me, he said he got rolled into, or he's on a call.
He got rolled into.
He got rolled into a call.
Okay. Then we'll go to the fire chief report. Chief Como.
Thank you, sir. I'll start off with a quick recap of data and stats for last month, December. We had a total of 44 calls. That broke down to 22 in the city limits, 18 in the district. We sent auto aid out 4 times, 2 to Seaside for both for structure fires, once to Cannon Beach for structure fire, and then once to Warrenton for motor vehicle accident. We received aid once, just like the month before, medics was unable to transport, and so then Seaside Fire with their new transport cable ambulance transported the patient for us. How that compares to December 2022, December 2022 had 98 total calls for the month. And we ended the year on call 757. So a total for the year, we were 13 calls, 2023 less than 2022. But the last 2 winter storms we had in December 2022 brought us 35 calls alone. So that's kind of how things skewed a little bit differently. If you minus those 35 calls, we had 722 calls for 2022. So we're still up if you just kind of look at a standard ratio of calls from that point. So if there's no questions from the data or stats for last month, I'd like to bring out the new division chief, Adrian Park, and have you, Mr. Mayor, take it from there.
Okay. Want to come over? This is Adrian, she goes by Andy. Our new division chief, printing and operations, which we're very excited to bring in. There's a whole group of fire guys hanging out back there too, that are gonna be here as well. So, Mr. Mayor,
We have somebody.
well, I'm waiting for everyone to move if they want. They're really not that high normally. I mean, there's a bunch of gear on them and they can come to your house and everything. Right.
Yay, forever.
All right. Adriana Park. Would you like to stand here so I can shake your hand right afterward?
Yes, absolutely. You want me facing you?
You can face them if you want, I don't care. Okay,
All right.
so if you'll repeat after me.
Okay.
I don't believe you have to have your hands raised for this, do you?
No, sir.
I, Adriana Park,
I, Adrian Park,
solemnly swear to uphold the US and Oregon constitutions
solemnly swear to uphold the US and Oregon constitutions
and ensure the welfare of my fellow members.
and to ensure the welfare of my fellow members.
As a Gerhart Fire Department officer, my primary duty is to safeguard life, health, and property.
As a Gerhart Fire Department officer, my primary duty is to safeguard life, health, and property.
I'll uphold professional standards, sharing knowledge with colleagues and the firefighters I lead.
I'll uphold professional standards, sharing knowledge with colleagues and the firefighters I lead.
Recognizing the badge as a symbol of public trust,
Recognizing the badge as a symbol of public trust,
I accept this responsibility as long as I uphold fire service ethics.
I accept this responsibility as long as I uphold the fire service ethics.
I'll strive to achieve the ideals instilled by the fire service,
I'll strive to achieve the ideals instilled by the fire service,
dedicating myself to saving lives and fulfilling entrusted duties.
dedicating myself to saving lives and fulfilling entrusted duties.
As a Gerhart Fire Department member,
As a Gerhart Fire Department member,
I willingly accept this obligation, making these promises
I willingly accept this obligation, making these promises
solemnly, freely, and upon my honor.
solemnly, freely, and upon my honor.
Okay, and Mr. Bagladian?
Yeah.
Was,
That's yeah.
that was close.
It's great.
You have the honor of pinning.
You want my glasses? Because I'm staff.
Oh,
You bring spare glasses.
We've got Band-Aids.
Please, try.
We're trying again.
There you go.
There it is.
Oh, I can see that under the nail.
Now I do have. There we go. There you go.
Welcome, Andy. Yeah, you bet.
I don't want to propose me.
I already tried earlier. Well, you passed the physical agility.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
We hope to never call you.
In just a minute, Justine, we'll ask you, what do we have on the screen?
Oh,
Nothing?
Oh, baby.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's good to meet you. Okay.
I'm just waiting for one person. Okay. That's great. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right, now moving on to city treasurer, master of money.
I wanted to start by following up with some questions that the last city council member that were asked. Rick had asked about Northwest Natural Gas and their franchise fee, which is paid annually in March, and CenturyLink pays theirs in February. So we'll be seeing those in the next couple of months. They just make one payment each fiscal year. I wanted to follow up with some of Councilor Cluffer's questions about Sounder Strategies. They are a professional service that we had procured through an RFP process. The activities that they perform are groundwater data management and water rights compliance reports, which are required by the state of Oregon because of our permit at the Nicoxie and for our water system. So they provide and prepare those reports and submit them to the state for us. They monitor and gather data on a monthly basis, but they only invoice us occasionally. It's not on a regular cycle. Our annual agreement with them is about $69,000. The city of Gerhart also pays the city of Warrenton a base fee for connection services. That was another question you had asked. And we have 2 meter connections. One of them is about $681 a month that we have to pay, whether we use zero water or not. And the other one is about $440. So we pay those for a 12-month period just to have connection to their water service.
So it's about 1,000 per month.
Correct. Overall, the city is meeting our financial revenue targets. I don't see anywhere that I am concerned about at this point. Noteworthy in expenditures was a payment in 1046 to Acuity for our audit, and quarterly payments for gas and clothing reimbursement in 101360 to the Gerhart Volunteer Fire Department. And the final payment to GMP Consultants in 101372 for their fire recruitment services. And a payment in 303063 to Sounder Strategies for their professional water services. We are continuing to watch the police materials and supplies appropriations. Chief Gregory is very conscientious of his budget and has been really proactive in trying to minimize expenditures and thinking about what staffing activities in the next few months as we finally become fully staffed. We were aware that there would be some additional costs with a transition in so much staff and just the new chief coming in and kind of, doing some modernizing and implementing of his own style. So we'll continue to monitor it, and if it gets too close, we'll find money elsewhere, because we need to support that department, and they're not doing anything extraordinary or crazy. Like I said, I think they're being very conscientious. Also, please note that there was a $200 check in 10-15-1552, which was court, and it had been avoided and reissued. So if you look at an old report, there was 200, and then if you look now, it's not there. It'll be back again once we reissue. But it wasn't a disappearing act I tried to do on you. I would also like to extend a big thank you to our water customers. As everybody hopefully knows by now, we use a third-party contractor to manually read our meter readings each billing cycle. And they have had some pretty serious staffing issues, which resulted in substantial meter reading issues. The largest being that the reader was simply guessing water reads. We call that a skip read. And so he was just estimating what he thought the reads were and submitting them as actual data. The previous meter reader has been terminated, and starting with the December billing cycle, so our December 20th billing, we had a new meter reader who happened to be a local person, who hopefully that will be a good thing. He appears to be very efficient so far. But the bottom line is our customers will be experiencing some invoice adjustments over the next two cycles for December and January. And some of them were pretty significant, and they both went plus and minus. When you have a misread, properties actually use the water. It's just that he didn't guess correctly. So they may owe us money, or we may owe them money. So we're making those adjustments as we find them. I would also like to thank the auditors for being here. They picked a meeting where we also had a public hearing, so it's a nice long meeting for them, but I appreciate Glenn from Acuity being here and hanging on for us.
Question, Are we done with the police vehicles? Getting the light bars and all that?
They're gonna go on Friday and pick up the last police car. We haven't made those payments, final payments. Correct.
Is that gonna happen soon, or?
Though that's coming out of a special revenue fund, though, you guys had approved that out of a different fund than the general fund, so it won't impact that fund.
Any other questions?
Yeah, on 10-18-49, what can you tell me about that vehicle equipment maintenance? That was, looks like it came out of say the number one more time again, 10-18-49?
So it's 18.
Oh, parks.
Yeah.
I'm wanting to think that had something to do with the repair and rebuilding of the tractor. That's a. No tractor in supply, I think.
So that was a surprise return, not something they could have planned for, budgeted for.
I think that they had just decided that it was time to do it. And I can look, Dana, to follow up on it.
Any other questions?
Just to add, by our estimations, it looks like we're down about $10,000 over last year on overtime. So far to date for the fiscal year.
Good.
So,
Running short.
yeah, so things have been running fairly smoothly. We are still spending some money in overtime, but it's less than last year, so it's good.
All right. Thank you, Justine. City attorney, excuse me, Peter.
Well, we're still, and I keep chatting the loop on this, we're still trying to make sure that Portland State is both accurately assessing our population so that we get our fair share of state revenues, and also that they are estimating our future population at a as accurate a level as possible to ensure that future funds, we will receive them, as well as it seems like the county's gonna have to do another buildable land inventory and housing needs analysis. And so I just want to make sure that those numbers are as accurate as possible. The Portland State folks that are doing that work now were not around during the last cycle, so hopefully that we continue to get kind of what we're entitled to, and also that, because they look at housing countywide, that we have really a needed housing problem, and so we need that their estimates to reflect real numbers, so that whether it's an expansion, which for us isn't likely, maybe a very minor one, but not a major one. But for other cities in the county that do have that capacity, that they would be able to do that. Or do a rezone if necessary. We have a application coming into the planning commission regarding some zoning issues. And that's for the planning commission. Doesn't make sense for us to talk about it now, but I think that as I've looked at our zoning map, I'm not sure why some things were put in the zones that were put in, because that doesn't reflect the reality of what's built. If council decides that that's a project that you might want to do right zoning, which I think would, a benefit of that would be, it would make parcel by parcel applications through the city's planning department, and it would make those less likely if we had a zone that reflected what was built in it. I would recommend, if that's something that would be a council priority, and I don't know that it would be, but if it is, we might want to do that on a comprehensive basis so that we could do multiple corrections at once, rather than it's a piecemeal approach, because Garrett and I have spent not an insignificant amount of time on the code language that's going to be coming in front of the planning commission, and just working through to understand why that code language is a code language, and collateral impacts that might have around the city, making sure there are none, and all of those things. And so I think if we have future development in the future, as people want to alter or preserve what already exists and is a non-conforming use to the zone, it seems like that could be a lot of staff time and work on our plate. So that's something I just want to highlight for all of you. There is going to be another housing bill that's going to go through the legislature this time. You might recall there was a bill that was a governor's priority that made it through the House but failed in the Senate by one vote, that involved some UGB expansion, some zoning, some tree cutting. That bill is back. It is different than it was last time. It will have an impact potentially on us. And last time it was amended, it had 7 rounds of major amendments. So I can tell you where we're starting, but I can't tell you where we're gonna end. And it clarifies some UGB swap language that was ambiguous. That when we talked to DLCD, they were going back and forth in their interpretation, which is frustrating for us because we would like consistency. So the good news is the bill as presently drafted clarifies when that can be used, and also clarifies the small expansion depending on buildable land inventory. So that's something that I'm monitoring a little bit as well. And then the last thing is I have gotten some questions on the ability of our short-term rental ordinance to apply to areas that are inside our planning. So the two unincorporated neighborhoods that are not within the city, does our short-term rental apply there? And it doesn't. If they're regulated through the county, a question of, well, could it? And the answer is not unless they annex into the city. And then I got some questions regarding whether the city could police that activity. And the short answer is no. And also the issue that led into a conversation about police. And so there is the potential that we could offer an enhanced police, as we're talking about how to make sure that we have 24-hour coverage or as much coverage as possible. There would be the ability to enter into an IGA with adjacent neighborhoods for them to pay for enhanced police as well. So that I don't want to spend a lot of time. I would not want to spend a lot of time on anything like that unless it was a council priority. But as we're discussing, how can we pay for things going forward? Because our inflation's higher than 3% and our property tax revenue for existing houses is limited to 3% a year. One way that we could perhaps pay for those services is if our neighbors paid an enhanced fee. And what that would mean then is that they call 911 instead of being referred to the state troopers or county, which is what it is now. It will be routed through us. And that is something that could benefit our local residents as well. So that might, anyway, I was asked, is that a possibility? Legally, it is a possibility. I don't know, you as the council determine what you have the will to do. Legally, there are ways that it could be addressed. As far as police power of short-term rentals, like that could be if noise, or if they're violating the county's noise ordinance, that could be something. But the only way our short-term rental regulations would apply is if a neighborhood annexes into the city. So that's kind of, and if it had been one call or question, I would just say, hey, Chad, it's kind of on the radar. But it's been enough questions in the last couple of months. I think people are feeling maybe a little less safe. They want a little bit more police. So there are options if that's something you as a city council would be interested in pursuing. And that is all I got, unless you have any questions.
It would seem to me that if an unincorporated area outside the city is having problems with their short-term rental policy, that's up to the homeowners association.
That legally is exactly correct.
Okay. I mean, I think it's great that they're reaching out to us and want police protection. I mean, that's another way to help fund the police department.
Yeah, no, we were talking about this short-term rental thing, and I said, if we were policing it with our police, because we had an IGA with the county, it could apply to if the county, I assume the county has a noise ordinance too, but anyway, something like that. But I said, you would have to pay we'd have to form an enhanced district. But yeah, I think that if they want it and you guys want it, then that's something that we'd have to determine what a fair amount to pay would be.
So that would be two different areas that are asking about enhanced or some kind of police coverage?
And I don't know the scope of the short-term rental issues in the Highlands. My understanding is there's some short-term rental. They have a lot of short-term rentals. And we all know what that was like when we had a lot. Now we have less, but yeah, I think that that I understand why permanent residents would be concerned, and I think some of them are. And I think the voting standard for changing their HOA, I don't know this for sure. I don't know this to be true, but it was represented to me that it's a very high bar to amend their HOA, a higher bar than either to annex into the city, or which would be your decision, I mean, they could do an application, but it's the city that gets to decide whether to annex or not. Or any sort of, any sort of special enhanced district that would just be like a simple majority vote of those voters. So maybe that's why they're contacting us, is the bar to change their HOA documents is too high. And I know that Chad's gotten a couple of inquiries too. And then I don't believe the Palisades have maybe short-term rental issues. There are only 1 or 2 houses that are on that, but the desire of more police, I think that that's something that might be of interest to them. So.
Well, I can see the Highlands one. I mean, you know, the police go on after the reserve. So I mean, they're right next door, and these guys, you know, they're behind that gated community.
Right.
They want the same, but they don't want to get rid of the gates, so.
Peter, has there been interest from the Highlands to be brought into the city?
Well, I think that the issue with that will be the gate. So, I mean, I remember.
Explain to me why that's an issue that I'm reading.
In our zone code, it says thou shalt not have a gate in the city of Gerhart. So there are no gated communities in
No
the city.
gated communities.
So my understanding, and this is from Mayor Widow, so it was a while ago, was that they didn't want to remove their gate. So that they had wanted to annex into the city, but they didn't want to remove their gate. So that would mean that the city would need to amend the ordinance. It would, the city could either remove their gate, and if the city wanted to annex them and they wanted to annex, that could happen. Or the city would need to amend its ordinance in order to not prohibit gated communities. Or we could maintain a status quo, but then they can't rely upon our ordinances regulating things like short-term rentals. They're under the county's purview.
You can't grandfather in a gate.
No, there's an ordinance on the books that Gerhart has no gated communities.
Right, but what we're saying is we've got so many quirky areas around here, we were already talking about that are in compliance with the zoning that was created at the time that they were existing, and the zone just ignored them. But I'm not suggesting that we make more of that situation, but is there any kind of a workaround for that, or what would be the most efficient workaround, I guess?
I mean, we could do what we did with the fences, which was, there was an hour where there was no fence ordinance in effect, and then there was a fence ordinance in effect, and every existing fence in the city became a pre-existing non-conforming use. And the reason that we did that is because some of the fences had been built legally before there was any ordinance whatsoever. Some of the fences may have been built with the prior city manager's agreement, even though they didn't. And we had someone walk around the city and take a picture of every fence that wasn't in compliance and demand that we take enforcement action against them. So what we did instead is we revoked our fence ordinance, imposed the fence ordinance, and then thanks to the resident who had taken pictures of all the fences, we had a complete inventory of all the pre-existing non-conforming uses. And that means that they get to repair their fence if something happens to it. But that there are no new fences. We can point and say, yes, all of those, this isn't selective enforcement, all of that. So that's something we can do for this, if that was what council wanted. But past city councils have said that a condition would be the removal of the fence. But that doesn't mean that that's the right decision for you. A past or current council can't bind a future. So it's just whatever the vision and values of Gerhart are at this time.
Well, I think if they're at all interested in pursuing that, I'd love to have a conversation about what that would look like in the city, pros and cons, blah, blah, blah.
Sitting and another day.
Yeah, so and we want to look at what as additional tax revenue that would generate, I think. Because we're, inflation is happening at a higher rate than our property taxes.
Any other questions for Peter?
Just one question, the legislation that you were talking about being considered as far as the UGB, what's your gut feeling on that? Is the state going to be pushing for more cities be encouraging them or requiring them to do?
So my experience, there are very few lawyers in the state of Oregon that have actually successfully gotten a UGB expansion. And I was having a conversation with one of the other ones last week because he was calling me about this bill. So my experience, and I assisted with one and was the primary attorney on a second, was that we started that process in 2017. We got approval in 2018. It went to the Oregon Supreme Court. I filed LUBA briefing yesterday. I have another LUBA case because we've been sued so many times. That will be in the next 2 months. And I've been contacted by jurisdictions that have said, can we hire you to do another one of these? And I don't want to do it, frankly, because I don't want to spend another 8 years of my life on one UGB expansion. So what I said to the attorney that called me is, my feeling is that if the city has under a certain amount of buildable land in their inventory, that they'd be allowed to have a certain, modest UGB expansion by right, so that it ends on the litigation. Because we do, and Gerhard, we looked at all this in Gerhard, like where could we expand our UGB, and there's very little because of the soil that's east of the highway, and that will liquefy in a tsunami event, and building a road on it, almost like building a road in Louisiana. I mean, it's kind of like you're building a bridge on a road. So we're not a great candidate for solving the Northern Oregon coast housing issues here in Gerhard. But to cities that do, to me, it makes sense that there would be some sort of expedited either rezone, so land is underutilized because it was zoned for something that there isn't any demand for, or modest expansions might be a good idea. And again, I was contacted probably 4 months ago by a mayor. Their city has less than 20 acres left, buildable land inventory. And I was like, you're looking at a 5-year process. So that land will all be gone. I mean, there's not going to be any 20 acres in the grand scheme of things, a whole lot of dirt. Anyway, so I get what the state's trying to do, but there are people that, as I learned personally, people feel very strongly about urban growth manager expansions. And they killed the bill last time, and they're gonna, who knows what will happen. But yeah, I think some sort of expedited thing so that a city that wants to responsibly grow can, but we're not just, burning down the system. But I don't know, well, I think that there's a real possibility that something's gonna happen at the legislature. And for cities outside metro that have under 10,000 population, it'll probably be like a 20 acre, 25 acre, maybe expedited process. Depending on our past growth. And they're trying to figure out that ratio right now. So that's 150 acres for metro, and then other jurisdictions much smaller. And then the question is, so what's the trigger? And my input was like, make the trigger clear and objective. Because we don't need to do land use hearing after land use hearing to determine if there's sufficient record in order to justify this. We need to know if it's under X, it's go. If it's a go, we have safe harbor, no one can sue us. So that would be, if I got to write the laws, that's what I would be looking at, something clear and objective.
Any other questions for Peter? Thank you, Peter. All right, Chad, you're up now.
I'm gonna keep my report really short. You have my report that I gave in the packet. And my team did a great job of updated you on many of the things in Gearhart. So I don't have anything to add to that. Is there any questions for me?
Yes. What is immutable data backup and recovery testing?
It's complicated.
Thank you, but what is it?
I'm not really sure, but it sounds important. It's taking our data, basically looking at our systems, testing them to make sure that they are secure.
That's what that all means.
That's
So
part
what
of
is
it.
immutable? I am an ignorant man and I don't change. Unchangeable? Non-changeable.
Unable to be changed.
So this system will help take the information that's off of our computers and hold it kind of like on a server and back it up so that we won't lose anything. Much of what we do is currently on the cloud. So our computers are connected to the internet. That's where our storage space is for many of our documents, but we also have many documents that are not stored on the cloud. So with this grant, we would be able to operate a system that would help us maintain and secure our data.
Okay. Thank you for answering the one question that had bothered me all night. Justine, I'm going to turn this over to you for our visitor.
So again, thank you, Glenn, for being here. Apologize for the length of wait. Every year, the state of Oregon requires the municipality to be audited. So we have contracted with Acuity and they have auditors send some pre-evaluation stuff in June to gather some information and for the next year. And then towards the end of the year, they finalize our audit and give the report. And this is Glenn from Acuity, and he is going to give us just a brief overview.
All right, well, good evening. Thanks for having me. I'm going to be pretty brief, honestly, because there's not a whole lot to cover. I guess one of the things probably that the council mayor that you want to be aware of is that, again, this year we're offering an unmodified opinion on the city's financials, which is also known as a clean opinion. That's what you're looking for. What it basically means is that in performing the tests of transaction cycles and account balances and those sorts of things, we didn't find any issues or problems that would require us to modify our opinion in any form. So again, that's what you're looking for. As part of doing the financial audit, the state of Oregon requires us to look at some additional compliance related things with regard to certain things like the city's compliance with Oregon budget law and public contracting and procurement regulations and some of those sorts of things. In doing that testing, we didn't find any issues with non-compliance in any areas. So again, that's great. That's what you're looking for. In looking at kind of the health of the city, when you look at your year ended June of 23, the city ended the year with about $1.7 million of unrestricted cash that's usable for operations. So that's a pretty good safety net, if you will. When you look at your governmental activities and you look at your cash balances compared to your the current debt liabilities and things that are due within a 12-month cycle, it's about a 2.74, 2.75 ratio to 1, and that's a good ratio generally when you're looking at numbers and financial analysis. That ratio you want to be a minimum of 1 to 1. 2 to 1 is good. So the fact you're about 2.74, 2.75 to 1 is again a good indication of the city's liquidity. One of the things that we look at when we're evaluating the financial statements of an organization and a municipality is specifically when you look at the primary operating funds of the organization, in your case, the general fund, we take a look at those fund balance carryovers going into the new year as an evaluation of solvency and those sorts of things. What we like to see, and this isn't a bright line test, it's not specified in any regulation or anything like that, but we like to see municipalities have a minimum of 3 months operating fund balance carryover. 6 months is better. Your carryover, your unassigned, unrestricted fund balance at the end of the year was about 5 months worth of operating expenses. So again, that's a good indication of solvency and liquidity. And part of the reason we look at that 3 to 6 month ratio is, as you well know, one of your primary funding sources is property tax revenue, and those dollars don't start rolling in until mid to late November. And so you've got to have sufficient carryover balances to sort of get you through the summer months and those sorts of things. But your carryover balances at the end of last year looked solid. We didn't have any other issues in looking at any of the invoices, any of those sorts of things that we tested. Stuff was in really good shape. Staff had things very well organized and ready for us. I think you've got a good group of folks there. Recommendation obviously would be just keep kind of doing what they're doing.
Great, thank you very much, Glenn. There is a question.
Okay.
On page 20, at the bottom of the page of the financial report, the sentence says, the city has not formally adopted a minimum fund balance policy. Do you recommend that we do that?
Not necessarily. The problem when you, or challenge rather, the challenge when you formally adopt a minimum fund balance policy, it is then one more thing that you have to track and make sure that you are in compliance with. If the general carryover balances that I talked about is not a bad rule of thumb. I don't know, there's no state requirement or federal requirement that you establish that. It's just that our professional standards require disclosure in the financials as to whether or not the audited organization has established one. And if you establish one, then we also have to test on an annual basis whether you are in compliance with that minimum fund balance. And if you are not, then we have to cite you for non-compliance with your own policy.
You got that?
Okay, thank you.
Those are your words, Sharon. That's a compliment.
Are there any other questions for Glenn? Okay, well, thank you very much for hanging in there with us, Glenn.
All righty, thanks. You folks have a good
Thank
evening.
you.
man.
Thank you.
Yep, take care.
I have 2 questions about this. For you guys, not him, here it is. The first one is, one of the other recommendation was to upgrade the accounting software so it all syncs. Or do we have plans to do that?
That is a long-term plan for us. When I first started, I felt like it was more of a priority than I feel like it is now. And I felt like it was a priority because I feel like that QuickBooks can be easily manipulated. We do have auditors that check our data. And I'm confident in my own work and our staff's work. So I had less reservations with it. I think that a stronger, more municipality-based software that is designed for fund accounting would definitely strengthen. It will be about $30,000 to $40,000 a year versus $1,000. And so it would be more comprehensive. So it would be more integrated into potentially maybe the water system, maybe incorporating like business licenses. A lot more things could be put into it. But $40,000 is a lot of money for our entity. And I have talked to some other cities that use QuickBooks. And I have talked to, obviously we met with several software companies and talked about what that looks like and how much that would be. I think that long range, just to have the security of having a really good financial system isn't a bad goal. I think we've cleaned up most of the issues that the auditors had problems with, just as far as organizational and kind of some checks and balances that we've put into place. So I feel comfortable with not necessarily implementing it right away, but I don't think we should put it on the back burner. I still think that it should be in there as an audit comment, so that we should still be thinking about that software and just knowing that it will be a pretty substantial financial.
Like what time frame would you like to see that?
I would like to see within 5 years.
I have
two things.
I have one other question, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
In this financial statement is talking about our, where our funds, where the funds are invested. And so my question, and this is probably a really ignorant question, but I'll ask it anyway. Is our money insured at all? Like,
So we put all of our funds in the local government investment pool. So the majority, number one, we don't have a lot of funds left over at the end of the year. So we spend money, it comes in, spend, we budget it out. So we do have, like Lynn said, we do have our ending fund balance, and we have some reserve funds that we keep money in. But we do keep all of our money in the local government investment pool. Traditionally, it's had the highest interest rates. Our bank had approached us about potentially matching those rates, but we would have to transfer over $1 million, and we can't do that. We can, and I had talked to our auditors about it, and as long as they had said, as long as we had pretty accessible access to the money, like we weren't locking it up, then it would be okay to look at other funds that might have higher interest rates, but over the long term, it's not a good idea. So yes, the local government investment pool has a protection for our funds.
it does.
And then we have our local bank, which we bank with Umpqua, and Umpqua, we keep under the FDIC requirements in there. We use it, I don't want to say as a flow through, but we transfer from the LGIP when we need funds in there. So the majority of our money is kept with the government pool.
Thank you.
Got it?
I was just gonna say two things. You guys are doing a great job, and you're saying that you can never leave. So I'm good with it.
Okay, well, good, I'm glad we're in agreement there. You can never.
Never leave.
Never. Can't roll.
I think we need to amend the employee handbook to say that, everybody but Justine.
All right, moving on, public communications written and oral. Anyone wishing to address the city council concerning items of interest not on the agenda may do so at this time. All remarks will be limited to 5 minutes per person. Requests to comment electronically must be submitted by email to the city recorder at info@cityofgearhart.com no later than 4 p.m. the day of the meeting. In-person attendees wishing to speak are required to sign in prior to the meeting. Now, we have Tom.
Thank you.
But the thing is, you want to talk about the water ordinance.
Okay, can I talk about it when you get to it?
Yes, you can.
Let's,
And what?
Add two more speakers for public to the list tonight,
To what list?
to be able to give public comment.
On something on the agenda or on something not on the agenda?
not on the agenda.
Correct.
And you're talking now.
Water.
He's talking about something that's on the agenda, the water.
All right.
So name and address, please.
Shannon Smith, 774 Pacific Way, your part, this great city. Anything else I missed? Okay. One thing before I jump into the estuary research reserve again. If you remember, I think from November, the information on the back of this about the aquatic resources special concern, that came to me originally from Dana Carey, and Katie, I'm not gonna say her last name, Blavite from Department of State Lands has a 239-page document where this is referenced about, I don't know, 20, 30 times. And it's about removal of trees, dirt, any kind of, again, natural substance for land use. And she sent me a copy today. I'm gonna forward it to the city if folks like Garrett and others don't have it. But this is like an overlay that goes into land development. It's different than wetlands. But for example, over here between what's Second and First, we went and measured the diameter of many of those trees and looked at how many were specific to this application. And the whole acreage over there qualified. So the developer, I know, had plans for 4 lots, he had to go down to 1. So there is that restriction that gets applied, but I'm not sure where in the development process it happens, but I want to make you aware of why I brought that to your attention, so.
Thank you.
All right, so you might recall from October, I brought information to you about the first ever wildlife estuary research report. And that was about wildlife, but what encouraged me was all the different research reserves in estuaries and throughout the communities in the country. As I talked about then, there's one in Oregon, the South Slough, and there's one up in Washington. The one in Washington is about 10,000 acres. The one in South Slough is about 4,000. Since then, what's been great is there's new information about if you'd like to supply and designate the information to get your own estuary area designated. And there's many, many, many benefits to it. There is infrastructure money for support of this too, and coastal security mitigation, things like that go along with that development prospect for creating a research reserve. When I spoke to South Slough, I asked about how many years ago they started. They got started probably 15 years ago in designating their site. They've been in operation now about 10 years. Of course, they're down by University of Oregon. They get many students come from that university, but the gal down there, she said, we would love to have another research reserve in the state, similar to, look at comparative studies, see how, your ocean health compares with our health. And then again, the impact of the nearby town. We have a difference in that we have population living right in the estuary area. Again, the difference in Gerhardt is we have a greenway, a green corridor that goes through our city, which is different a little bit than again, Seaside. This map I brought, and again, next time I come, I'm going to diagram where something like this could be, what kind of acreage we're talking about. And again, it would involve the 2 cities. What I found out though is that cities like ours have a lot of benefit from this. And it's positive for the area. I asked the South Slough gal about how much actual visitor traffic they get.
In 1 minute.
Thank you. They actually have a fantastic visitor center with actually events, activities, and information that has, she said, totally improved how the visitors come to the area. She said they're really respectful of our waterways, our beaches. She said, I think it's created both economic benefit as well as what do I call it? An enthusiastic population that loves this kind of preservation and learns from it. So that's part of what I'd like to present. Bob's going to continue with some more information about what else has occurred. We contacted the National Park Service, several of the nonprofits locally, as well as then, who else were we? Oh, Trust for Public Lands to find out how they measure economic value of conservation and particularly land conservation. So there's a lot of cool things to come. It is a designation process that actually goes all the way to the governor of the state and then on to NOAA. So it has some various, but they put a whole set of that criteria on the website. So we'll continue next time.
Okay. Shannon,
You can ask her.
Shannon, can you get some more information on the research reserve
Yes.
for us, so we know what that entails or how to go about that or what the benefit, I mean, we need a lot more information.
We'll copy you with a couple things that I've written and Bob's written, and we'll get sent that to you by email.
Thank you.
You want?
Okay, Bob?
Bob Carson, 226 Ridge Drive, Earhart. Shannon gave you the big picture. Here's what we propose for this area. First of all, the name might be Three Streams Reserve. The Mechanicsburg and Neowana rivers run north through Seaside, Oregon, merging to form an estuary just south of Gerhardt. Flowing south through Gerhardt to the estuary is Neocoxie Creek. We propose that these three streams, the estuary, and an unspecified area of floodplains, wetlands, and other low-lying lands be protected by the federal, state, Clatsop County, and/or cities of Seaside and Gerhardt. They are important for dozens of species of plants, invertebrates, fish, and birds, as well as a few species of amphibians, reptiles, and mammals. Residents and visitors enjoy these areas for walking, boating, birding, fishing, and many other activities like watching sunset over the Pacific Ocean, photography, kite flying, building sand castles, playing with dogs, and hunting sand dollars. This area is already partly protected. The North Coast Land Conservancy owns property along the Mechanicsburg River. The Clatsop and Nehalem Confederated Tribes have established a Neowana Point Habitat Reserve on the northeast side of the estuary. The city of Gerhardt prohibits vehicles on the southern mile or so of beach north of the estuary. The city of Gerhardt has the Ridge Path, a walking trail through town just west of Neocoxie Creek. The city of Seaside does not allow vehicles on beaches on the south side of the estuary. The city of Seaside has a park with kayak and boat launches on the south side of the Neowana River. The goals would be to protect lands along the three streams in the estuary by gifts of property, easements, purchases, and/or laws. This should include increasing the required setback from the streams or estuary for new construction. We also propose making trails along the rivers with bridges and raised boardwalks where necessary. We should establish specific viewpoints for looking at the streams and watching birds. We should make boat launches. One in particular should be for kayaks and canoes on the Mechanicsburg River in downtown Seaside. We should prohibit the cutting of any more old-growth Sitka spruce and other large trees. The benefits would include more and better habitat for wildlife, both plants and animals, more access for people to enjoy the wildlife and the scenery, or opportunities for exercise and recreation, less damage from ever-increasing floods due to climate change, reducing tsunami and earthquake damage, structures on low-lying, water-saturated, fine-grained, organic-rich sediments are particularly vulnerable to inundations, subsidence, and shaking. We might be able to get help from a department, for example, planning, wildlife, fisheries, biology, oceanography, architecture, and/or students at Clatsop Community College, Western Oregon University, the University of Oregon, or Oregon State University. For example, landscape architects at Washington State University planned modifications to Mill Creek for the city of Walla Walla. Importantly, Oregon State University has a new marine studies initiative. Professors and/or students may want to work on this proposal. And the University of Oregon has an Institute for Marine Biology. Finally, when you consider a tree ordinance, zoning, etc., please consider the preservation of trees, wetlands, and water bodies long into the future. This will save lives and property and make our home more beautiful and better habitat. Sorry, I only have one copy, but Shannon's going to email this to you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
I only got 6 pages, so.
Okay. All right, at this time, would anyone like a 5-minute break? Okay, 5 minutes. Chad, will you put it on the timer, please?
I'll go make sure it's safe. Are you pausing the recording?
Chad, can you please unmute?
Now,
Thank you.
Okay, we're looking at our written correspondence and we don't have any questions that I can hear from anybody, so,
I have a question.
okay, there we go.
So where, I mean, we've got this thing that's going on down around E5. Does that have something to do with your heart?
On only that they have to notify us about the fill. Or the removal of soil. And that's just the DLCD requirement. So that's the only reason we're being noticed.
Okay.
We're not going to be doing it unless, of course, you want to write a letter
No, I.
because you got some objections to.
No, that's, they raised their tab.
Okay. All right, moving on. We don't have any late correspondence. Well, Robin Lane was late correspondence, but it was been added into our packet. All right, ordinance and resolutions, second reading. An ordinance regulating the operating of the water system of the city of Gerhart, governing responsibilities, establishing fees and providing penalties for violations thereof. That's ordinance 940. Is that the one you want to speak to? Tom, I'd like you to speak at this time. Name and address, please.
Okay, Tom Tease, 292 Woodland Avenue. I'd like to talk about the ordinance, especially the meter part, which is section 5. And I would like to have you put down your counselor pencils and pick up your private person pencils and listen on this. The city water department may at any time install a meter at owner's expense for measuring water according to the established metered rates. If the meter fails to register properly, the meter will be replaced by city water department. When I read that, it sounds to me like if the meter quits on its own accord, that the private citizen has to pay for it to replace it. And this is a meter that belongs to the city on city property. And why should a private person have to pay for something that the city owns that broke up? I can see it with new installations, you know, when a person builds a house and has that whole process done. But I don't understand why this. And would it be better if it read something like at any time or only new installations? That the owner has to pay for that? That's really what I have to say.
I don't see where it says that the homeowner has to pay for the replacement of the meter if the meter goes belly up.
Well,
It just says that,
It's ambiguous.
I mean, what it basically
Yeah.
says, if it fails to register properly, okay, you will be charged an average from the billing cycle.
No, I'm not talking about the water rates, I'm talking about the water meter.
Yeah.
Where it says, department may at any time install a meter at owner's expense.
Right, so should we have in there if the meter fails to register properly, the meter will be replaced by the city water department at the city's expense?
That would take the ambiguity out of it. If that's your intent, then
I don't know if it's our intent.
Yeah, I always like to make it more clear. I'm not sure,
What is the intent?
Well,
Who pays for it if it fails?
It's a city meter, right?
correct, and we at this point have been replacing not damaged, excuse me, but bad meters or meters that are not reading correctly on our own dime.
Well, and we also, I mean, what we do, and I think the intent of this is that we, when you develop property the property is responsible for meter installation, that initial cost. And in the building process, they fill out a water permit and they're charged for that. So it's a flat rate that you approve with our rates, and then if there's any additional boring or anything, we invoice them back that additional charge. So I think that that's what that line is. The city has been paying and pays for all meter replacements if it's incorrect or needs repair or. And we also have our regular maintenance where we replace sections to keep meters current and updated. And that isn't at a charge to the
Okay,
homeowner.
so we're doing what Tom's asking, basically.
In practice.
We just needed the words put in there.
Well, and on the flip side of that, if we have somebody out there who's damaging their meter in order, because
They get
a
charged for it.
knucklehead. Yeah, so I would say, property owners shall not be charged for replacement of meters
That are defective.
that are damaged or defective due to no fault.
I think, yeah,
Or
or
not due to the owner's fault or something along those lines. I don't think, speak as well as I write, so could give me.
I think that would be.
So what is the cost of replacing a meter and that would include workers' time as well?
what did we establish in our rates?
Well, it was 1150 and I think it did go up, and I can't, that. new rate,
Somewhere near
not for
$1,300.
Yeah. It's about.
Really? How much does a meter cost?
Depends on the style of meter. If you, I think that we've been buying those about 200 and less.
Okay.
And then what the people are also paying for is, in regards to the development that everybody else is paid for through their taxes as well. So it's not specifically built just on exactly how much it costs for us to install, but it's also a small amount of a buy-in as well.
Okay.
All right. So we were to say if the meter fails to register properly at no fault of the owner, the meter will be replaced by the city water department at the city expense. So if the defective equipment, we would pay for it. If they sabotage it themselves, then they would pay for it.
That sounds great to me.
Make sure that we get that.
One of the reasons why I brought it up, because, you have to realize that you might think that it works now, but down the road, we aren't gonna be here, someone else is gonna be here, and they might read that as, hey, I'm sorry, it's defective, you have to pay for it.
But if we have somebody who backs their car into it or does something stupid to it.
Then they can,
So, Peter, should we add then that just the may that homeowners may be charged?
Well, I think we have two issues. One is that for new construction, what we pay for the water, which is essentially like a system development charge. They're paying for the cost of the meter as well as a portion of their cost on the system. If a meter, I think what I hear you saying is if a meter is damaged through no fault of anyone, then the city would pay it. If the meter is damaged because of negligence, on the part of the owner or another person, then the owner should have to. So if their teenager drives a car into the meter, they're on the hook. If the computerized portion of the meter fails, just, for whatever reason, corrosion or something, then it's the city.
Accurate.
Do you have to put something in there?
So I think we can keep it as it is, but if that's your intent, because whenever there's any ambiguity in the code, we all know what this means, but in the future, if somebody has a question, I guess you've now recorded what you mean, but you know what to mean, which is that if it's through no fault of the owner or their guests, if it's through no fault of a person, if it's just, then we do it. If it malfunctions, if it's the fault of someone, then it's the owner.
Yeah, so I was thinking about scenario where they have their landscaping redone and the landscaper screws it up somehow.
Still their responsibility.
So I think that if it's their responsibility, if damage due to negligence, the owner pays for it. So I think that that's what we would say. If it's due to negligence of a person, then it's the owner. If it's because the equipment malfunctioned through no fault of the owner, it's the city. And then if they then want to sue their landscaper for the cost of the replacement, then that's on them and that's not our business.
Yeah, but most of the meters are on public right of way. Landscapers, if he puts his landscaping box in there with the anti-siphon device, that's on the property.
No, I was thinking more where they're digging up stuff to plant something or, things happen.
Yeah. People dig without getting.
We've had our dump truck run over hours quite a few times. I finally had to take rocks out there and paint them orange.
Big boulders.
Not that big.
Okay, so our practice is in alliance with what our intention is. How do we clean this up and yet still get this going very quickly? Is there a purpose?
Yeah, let me think about it.
I think it's.
I think if we say if the meter malfunctions, the meter will be replaced by the city water department at the city's expense. So malfunction will be like a computer glitch, and that's not their fault. There's nothing they can do about the internal computer or chip or whatever it is. But that's also that implicit in that, given the sentence before it, is if it's damage due to negligence, it's the it's on the property owner.
How about if you just get rid of the first sentence?
The first sentence is for if they're getting their first meter. Or if they're getting a meter that they drove over with their car.
Or if they get it, we have had instances where they have pulled the meter because they're doing some demolition, so they pulled the meter and then they want the meter put back in. We also charge them because they pulled the meter at their own request.
So I think if
That
we say
doesn't happen very
malfunctions,
often,
it's clear
just a
that it's
few
not
times.
through the acts of a third party.
So take out fails to register properly and put
If
functions.
the meter malfunctions,
And then put placed by the city water department at the city's expense.
yeah.
So add at the city's expense
Mhm.
and substitute malfunctions for fails to register properly.
Yeah. And if they say, well, that's not what the city meant, we can say, watch the video.
And then, Peter, is there in there about damage due to negligence? Is that in there or is that not in there?
Well, it's anything that's not a malfunction.
Right, the only
First line.
thing that the city will pay for is malfunctions.
Okay, so that's not actually in the language is just changing those two little things.
So there's the general and there's the specific. So the general applies unless there's a specific out. In this case, the specific out that would make us pay for it is it malfunctions.
So essentially what he's saying is the first line is what is the rule that the citizen will pay. The second line is the exception. If the meter malfunctions, then we're gonna replace it at our expense. Correct. So there you go. The only exception is gonna be if it's our fault.
Or meter replacement, correct?
Yeah, if it's
So-
no, if it's of no fault if it's by no fault of the owner.
Right.
Or the owner's guest or whomever, then. So this would be a malfunction through some glitch, or we want to replace it, an existing meter to make it more accurate, so we're not wasting water.
Which is a malfunction.
Right, so that's correcting
Okay, yeah,
the error.
it's antiquated or whatever, yeah.
Well, I think that for those that work on the ground, we can work with that.
Yeah,
Thank you, Tom. Good observation.
So
Is that it?
anyone else?
That's it.
Any questions? Any discussions? Does someone want to make a motion like number 2?
I make a motion that we make a motion to approve with the amendments that we just discussed.
Ordinance 940.
Ordinance 940, I'm sorry. So I make a motion that we approve ordinance 940 with the amendments we just discussed.
Second. Is there any discussion? We have a motion and a second. And no discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? It passes.
So do we have to go to a second reading on this, or is that sufficient?
Yeah, that was a minor change. That was just a minor clarification. It doesn't change the substance of the ordinance, right? It just clarifies it so we all know.
All right, we're moving on to ordinance 941. An ordinance amending the city of Gerhart zoning ordinance regarding the placement of political signs in Gerhart. And this is the second reading, is it not?
Yes, this is.
So if we read it by title only, that would count as a second reading?
I have a question. When we discussed this before, it was brought up at that time that this should also be the ordinance, not only for political signs, but for holiday signs such as the 4th of July. And the way this is written, the 4th of July or holiday signs were left out. Was that intentional, or will there be another ordinance for holiday?
So we're doing another ordinance for other, it wouldn't just be holiday signs, it would be other temporary signs. The reason we kept this one moving through versus adding that to this is so that this would be in effect before the May election.
I understand. Thank you.
I got a question. So on the first page here where it says the maximum sign area is 6 square feet, below that it says signs may not be attached to trees, shrubbery, utility poles, or traffic control signs. So if the tree or the shrubbery is on private property, can the people put a sign up on and nail it to their tree or shrubbery?
So my understanding of what the city was hoping to accomplish through this would be what I term like an in-ground political sign. So one that through like metal stakes or wooden stakes is in the ground in the person's yard. Or there's also the possibility of a sign in someone's window. The reason I had put in that tree language is because we had specific complaints about people nailing political signs to trees. And the major concerns were trees in the right of way, but then there were other people that just wanted to keep signs kind of at that, in that yard type of, and then we can amend it so that they can nail them to their own trees, but I think that our idea was that this would be those kind of in-ground. They usually have 2 little metal things and you just stick them in the ground and yeah, so we can amend it to allow them to attach it to trees if you want.
Well, I mean, if you got a 6-foot fence, solid fence, and you got a tree behind it on your property and you want to display a political sign or something like that.
We can put it on the maps. So on the end of, so a quick way to fix that would be to insert on section D versus placement except as provided by this section. Temporary signs will not be attached to trees, shrubbery, utility poles, or traffic signal or traffic control signs or devices on the public right of way or on public property.
In public property or right of way.
Okay.
Well, they're already not allowed on the right of way.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, if someone has a 6-foot fence, we could allow them to put it on, attach it to the fence.
Yeah, it's on the fence.
We had a specific discussion about that last time,
We
and
did.
determined that
Yeah.
they could put it on a fence,
Right.
it would be we'd be on very shaky ground if we said they couldn't put it on their own
Right.
fence.
Right,
But he's asking about if I have a tree on my property in the middle of my yard and I wanna attach a fence, should I be able to, or attach a sign, tie a sign on there, I should be able to tie a sign on in my own. So just by, I know that you already said it, but if we're adding this in, we might just throw in 3 more words on public right of way.
Yeah. I agree.
Yep.
Okay,
And it makes it very clear.
Mhm.
Okay.
And I have one other thing also. When I was reading, other political sign ordinances, they also included the. Well, I should say, the line, the lines that say, property between the sidewalk and the street, which, you know, is a grassy area. A lot of people think that that is okay for signage. And that was happening when you were running for city council. And I think your opponent placed a lot of signs in that area and they were removed. And you blamed you, but you were in Africa, so you couldn't have done it. But a lot of sign ordinances do specify that. Do you think that should be put in there at all? Just
Well,
make
so
sure.
I think some people put signs in right away just because they don't know where the right of way is. So I think they're
Right.
acting in good faith and they just don't know. And that's why we had the language that, so if the city removes the signs that are in the right of way, then the people can come and get the signs. And I've had that issue, people not trying to do anything wrong, just didn't know. So that's. And I think before city staff removed a ton of signs, they'd probably give the campaign a heads up and say, hey, these signs are in the, before we send our public works people out.
I don't think we've ever removed a sign.
Yeah,
We're such an unusual city, it's not a one size fits all, and this subject came up when we were talking about where to plant trees, and people don't understand that. And the thing is that it's not the same all throughout the city, right? It's, you know, my property, it ends at the, you can tell generally by where a telephone pole is placed, that should be the end of the property, but it's not always the case. But in most of our houses, or most of our streets, it's where the rocks begin, but not always. Sometimes it's where so there's no clean way to say what you're trying to say.
We have a
Whether
city
one size
foot
fits
right
all.
away in the street
Yeah.
is this way on that right away all over the place.
Okay.
So that would be, we could be here for weeks trying to figure out how to say that.
Yeah, all right.
and normally the utility poles are on the right of way.
Right, but the water meter is usually on city property, so if you use those, you've got the front property line.
Just the judge used the word usually.
That's right.
Hard to communicate.
There are some streets that are 30 foot.
Yeah.
So how do we move forward on this? Do we do the same thing we did last time, we do approve ordinance 941, reading once by title only, but with the change, with the.
Yeah, I mean, this is.
As amended?
This
As
is a,
amended and with
yeah,
the
not a
minor
substantial,
amendment.
right, it's just clarifying
And
where.
substantial amendments that we just discussed.
Yeah.
So I'll make that motion.
Second. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, we have no old business. We have new business. Anyone wishing to make a comment is limited to 3 minutes. Anyone in the audience want to make a comment on our new business, which is the audit, compliance, employee handbook amendments, Park Rural Fire Protection District contract, discussion on the preservation and removal of trees zoning text amendments? Anyone on Zoom wishing to make a comment? All right, we have none, so we'll just move right along to the audit compliance.
So this feels like a new document and it shouldn't, because apparently this is something that we should have been doing all along. I have worked in municipal or educational institutions for almost 30 years. And I had never done this type of report, but I have always, every year I've seen an audit, have seen this comment. So Acuity had sent us information and a basic template and requested that we move forward with just notifying the council and the staff that we understand that we have looked at the audit report and that this is one of our weaknesses. The weakness is our organizational structure, and it is because we're so small. The corrective action for this, because we can't afford to hire new staff, is to have strong internal controls and policies and procedures that counterbalance for transparency, for fraud. We've tried to do that. The auditors check that to make sure that they feel comfortable. Otherwise, they would give us a more strict audit report. So this is the template they've given that we will send to the state, that we understand, that we are aware, and that we will work to always try to have corrective action against this weakness.
Okay. So in this, it also states that the city council has to be one of the overseers of our budget and our money expenditures. So that's why we get a report. That's why we have to look over the report, and that's why we have to question if we have questions.
And that's why you are members of the budget committee, because you are a major component in this. Why you approve resolutions when we need to do appropriations, why you would approve supplemental budget. They want the council to be actively involved.
So this is just for information only. We don't have to have a motion or anything like that.
It's just an acknowledgement, and then they've asked that we all sign, the three of us. Yeah.
Question? That's all right.
So actively involved, the council being actively involved, are we actively involved enough for them? or-
Yeah, because you get the monthly report with all of our transactions. I mean, there isn't a financial transaction that doesn't show up on that report in one of the, there's 3 different forms, but basically the revenues and expenditures is all the transactions. So you see those. You could ask to see any of those more in detail, a receipt, a check, whatever it is. Then you also see, you're part of the budget process. That's pretty active.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's okay for them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that the reporting that we do is probably more than most.
All right, moving on. We're moving to the employee handbook amendment. Everyone has gone over this. Everyone is familiar enough to listen to Justine go through all the minor changes.
So I'm gonna be quick, because I do want to respect your time, but the employee handbook is a super important reference document. In April of 2021, the city used an employee handbook template from CIS, which is our liability insurance carrier, to create a new handbook. The proposed amended January, so the one that you were looking at, the 2024 handbook, is essentially the same document. It just has revisions in it. So overall, the document remained the same, the language remained the same, the headings remained the same. It was just some adjustments to realign practice, so that we had practice more consistent, and maybe some new legislative things that had come up in there. So we had been working with an attorney at Miller Nash who specializes in human resources. And we have been updating or revising the handbook so that it actually reflects our policies and practices. Administrative Suite went over the amended handbook with our supervisors. So he met with each one of them, talked about each section and things they liked and didn't disliked. And then the goal for this document would be, it supports our employees, it assists our supervisors in making clear and consistent decisions, and it provides liability protection to the city so that we've outlined actions that we may have to take if something happens. I appreciate the continued reviews from Mayor Smith and Councilor Gould. We've seen this document a lot of times over the last few months. Unfortunately, the original handbook file, so the actual data file had been transferred around to lots of different people. CIS had worked on it. It was transferred to Google, it was pulled out of Google. There was too many issues to easily track the changes that we had made. So I just want to kind of highlight through the document the primary noteworthy changes. So page 9, we added required language for the Workplace Fairness Act. That's new language that had come up. It's in the second paragraph, so that was new language that had been added. Page 14 is additional language that allows the extension of the introductory period based on department needs. So not everybody follows the same introductory period. The police department and perhaps the fire department need some additional time to make some formal evaluations. They have a longer process, so they had requested, so we had added that. Page 17, language in the compensatory time has been revised to align with city practice. We didn't change what we had been doing, we just clarified what actual practice was. Page 19, language had been added that ties wage and salary increases to be based on satisfactory work performance. So you're not just automatically guaranteed a pay step increase. You actually have to have performance of a satisfactory level, and so we added that. Page 20, we did just put the same language in for the performance review so that the wage and salary language was added. Also on page 20, we revised the section on employment of PERS retirees. PERS is regulated by state statutes, and the language has been simplified to allow the employment of PERS retirees. And agreements with retirees should be done based on legal requirements and council's final approval. We don't need a whole bunch of other language in there that isn't necessary. Page 22, the section on sick leave, that entire section, which is about 2 pages long, a lot of it has been revised. There has been no changes to the employee's sick leave benefits. They still accrue the same, they still get to use it for the same thing. However, there has been language added for the Oregon paid sick time, which is a program that was passed, and it does benefit our temporary and seasonal employees. So we put that language in there, it's mandatory. Page 24. The federally recognized holiday of Juneteenth had been added. Page 25, paid leave Oregon language has been added, which is a state mandated program that provides access to paid family, medical, or safe leave. This is beyond anything that the employee benefits packages. This is a tax that comes out of their check that has all kinds of state requirements for filling it out. So that needs to be in there because they now have access to that type of leave. Page 29, other benefits have been added. So just in that heading, it used to just be healthcare. Now we've added other benefits at the end of that section. We've already always been providing these benefits. They're not new. There's some disability and some life, and they were never mentioned. So we've added those. Page 31, PERS language has been modified. Again, PERS is a state mandated regulated program, and the city isn't altering in any way a practice that we're doing or the way we're handling retirement. Specific regulatory information should be accessed through PERS website and not an employee handbook. So we've just simplified that a little bit and clarified what we do. And then page 35 and 37 have a recording policy section that was added that we didn't have before. And that was it. Those are the significant changes. We made sentence structure changes, grammatical changes, periods, that kind of stuff also. But these were the primary substantial changes that we made. Yes.
Are you done? I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I don't mean to.
Done, no, I'm done.
Just a quick question, the holidays, are these all federally mandated holidays, or did you guys?
They are federally, not all of them are federally mandated. Those are the holidays that the city of Gerhart had given their employees as a paid benefit.
Right,
Many organizations have different ones.
so it's Gerhardt's discretion, city of Gerhardt's discretion as to these holidays.
Absolutely.
Okay,
I'm not sure there's a law that says you have to pay anybody for a holiday. I think that these are ones that we acknowledge that we pay our employees for.
okay, I guess my question is, I mean, I was in the medical field and I got like 6 paid holidays a year. So I was kind of surprised when I came upon this. I'm not against it or anything. But the day after Thanksgiving, is that just something to be nice or?
I think the unions were the ones that negotiated for that. I think the unions were the ones that negotiated for all of these.
Well,
You know, so the Teamsters, the longshoremen.
No, but she's saying it's Gerhardt's discretion.
Right.
It is
And I
Gerhardt's
would
discretion.
argue that we'd have a tough time changing it now, not only that, but also this is something simple that we can do that allows us to remain competitive in the workforce. And it's a benefit that we can offer our employees that may make up for not being able to pay them top salary or with some of the things that the other larger cities around us can do.
I don't disagree with that. I'm not
No, I get you.
commenting on that. I'm just curious as to where that came from. Do other cities have 11 paid holidays? Like, I mean, what's the
I
standard?
heard it to Seaside.
This is the list of holidays that's been negotiated by AFSCME and SEIU. So that's why Columbus Day is no longer on the list and Juneteenth is. So the number of holidays didn't change, but the specific holidays did.
Okay, I'm just curious.
And just to give you an idea, I was talking to Chief Gregory, and he said that the system at Seaside is similar, yet they also get 4 additional floating holidays and the birthday off. So,
But the longshoremen.
yeah, so they get some more with that as well.
So that brings up a question. What are the police? I mean, how do the police handle this?
Time and a half,
Oh, so
it's
they.
what they would receive when they work those days.
Okay, and yes, ma'am.
I have major heartburn over corrective action discipline policy. And I had,
Page where?
page 47. And I had heartburn a year ago when or whenever that was, that we first got the handbook. And this is why I'm upset with it. Because on the first paragraph, about 3 lines down, it says, when performance or conduct does not meet the city of Gerhart standards, city of Gerhart will determine whether it will terminate the employee's employment or provide the employee with a reasonable opportunity to correct the deficiency through suspensions without pay, such as in no particular order, verbal warnings, written warnings, suspensions without pay, and demotions. So this is gonna say, if somebody messes up, they don't get a written warning, they're just going, you're suspended without pay. And the employee go, what did I do wrong? And they say, well, I didn't have to give you a verbal warning or a written warning, but I suspend you without pay. And that's what this policy allows the supervisor to do. Or, I don't know, maybe they didn't know they were doing wrong, but all of a sudden they're suspended. I think this should be a progressive way of determining discipline. That's it, my heartburn is over.
So usually
agree.
progressive
You agree?
discipline.
Thank you.
Well, I agree that it should be progressive.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank
so
you.
progressive discipline usually means that first you have a verbal warning.
Yes.
You meet with them, it's documented. Then if they do it again, then they get a verbal warning.
Yeah, because you
They get a
could
written warning.
have like a driver for public works and maybe he's texting on the phone, which he's not supposed to do, but he didn't know that it was a city policy and somebody goes, oh, I'm sorry, you were texting your without pay.
This is state law.
Well, but yes, that is true, it is a state law. But for he to be suspended without pay, without a verbal warning, I think is a flaw.
I think that's up to the supervisor. I think the
Well-
supervisor, we either have faith in our supervisors. So we're gonna, to corral their crews, or
It's it's a basic tenet of human resource training that supervisors should receive. I know that they received it in the training that I was here. That progressive discipline is what you strive for. However, there are times you have to have it written this way
Yes,
and permissive because, let's say, heaven forbid, one of our officers has never had a problem before and suddenly he's out on a car accident and he takes something from the car and steals from it. We're not going to start with a write-up on that. That is going to be much more serious.
I agree.
And so I think that the way that this is written allows for that. It allows for, you can decide, it doesn't have to be in any particular order, but it may be this or it may be that, but it's gonna be proportionate to whatever the activity is.
I agree, if it is very egregious as that would be, then yes, I agree, but I think any other method of discipline that follows normal procedures, I think is better than just saying, I'm sorry, you were on your phone, you're fired.
And I agree with you because I think that it's kind of written in here where it says terminate the employee's employment and provide employee reasonable opportunity. The deficiency through progressive discipline such as, so we're stating in here that progressive discipline is what we're trying to strive for. But there have been opportunities to where it's just not possible. And so I think this gives us the flexibility to make it. And if we were to discipline somebody that was outside of progressive discipline and we did it incorrectly, things such as bully is available to employees and other avenues to where they can hold the city accountable. And our job is to try to keep you out of trouble.
So how can we word that would make you more comfortable? Do you want us to specifically insert in there that progressive discipline?
It's in there already. It's there. So it says some acts, particularly those that are intentional or serious, warrant more severe action, including termination on the first or subsequent offense. And the practice of the city is very much in almost every instance that's been a progressive, we haven't had that many discipline issues, frankly, but it's been progressive. There has been, I can think of one issue where it was quite serious and we couldn't. There's too much liability to risk something. And so we had to take action outside of this. So it's very rare that that would happen.
I agree, and I know what you're referring to, and I agree with you, but I just think it somehow should be, I don't know.
Well, you can blame the lawyers. I mean, like the intent is both reflected in this of following it and also saying, but we're not required to.
Well, what I would do is, I would just cross out in no particular order. That would make me happy.
Well, but then you're limiting us to always following that order and there's no exception when we need it.
I think this is, for a new hire or something like that, I think this is telling them just exactly, where the city is standing. And if they don't like it, they don't have to, they can pull their application.
Well, if you read the last paragraph on page 47, it gives the city the outline of what it's going to do. But it doesn't lock the city into doing that. But it does state, it will follow these steps. And if you've got some guy who's just doing something absolutely, a person, excuse me, not a guy. A person, because there are other genders involved. It really basically tells right there that you can go, okay, we're gonna give you a written notice. No, we're not. We're gonna go straight to demoting you. Or we're going to go right to, hell bent on, you're out of here. What you did is wrong. no way you can cut it and make it better. So I don't know, I understand your heartburn over that, but I don't think changing that is going to. I mean, it gives the city in this final paragraph of it the right to go from A to Z.
It does, it does. The first paragraph, if you take out in any particular order, deals with normal stuff. But including the third paragraph gives the city the freedom to go guns blazing.
Well, if
If you need it, you got it.
if this was, if this was a private corporation, you know, as long as you stay within the boundaries here.
All right. Well, I acquiesce to the council.
I think
I had to say what I meant.
in practice, we agree with you completely. And it's just not written down in policy. And if we were to start progressive, disciplining people willy-nilly or very harshly, then we'd start losing our employees, and you would have a heads up to that. Because you are the ones responsible in the whole grand scheme of things. But I think this gives us the tools that we need just in case, and thankfully, we haven't had to pull that trigger, but twice.
Don't use that kind of terminology.
Yeah.
Okay, it's inappropriate in a city council meeting, it's just. There. I'm sorry, I just, people will go, what, they're talking about guns?
No, I don't.
Did you see me say that word?
No. So we're pulling the trigger.
That,
I get it.
they just, some people will take that and go, oh my God, did you hear what they did at the city council meeting?
Okay, so I know that we went back and forth on quite a few things, and so please forgive me because I had time to do a little bit more research and rethink a couple of things, so I have some suggestions. Number one, there's nothing in here that requires our employees to wear seatbelts while on duty, and I think that's a common tenet in most public organizations, and it's good for our insurance, it's good for our protection, it's good for our employees. We require that they wear seatbelts while on duty. And then number two is on page 34, search of property. It took me a few minutes to put my head back into the game and remember put back on my old supervisor managerial hat, but employees have no expectation of privacy on the items that we give them to work with. For example, if we gave them a car, we gave them a locker, we gave them a computer, we gave them a phone, we have the right to search that. However, we do not have the right to search their car if it's their own personal car or their own personal purse. In such circumstances, I mean, if it were, I'm just thinking if it were a criminal situation, which is the only reason I could think that we would want to search somebody, you would lose that evidence, it'd be of no evidentiary value. So I think we need to strike anything that says that we can search their car or anything that belongs to them that's not provided by the city.
So I had flagged, this was one section I had flagged, I share your concerns with this. I think anytime you're searching a person's car, if you don't have a probable cause, and this is reasonable suspicion, which is less. And I think that, I mean, when I talked to Chad, I said, if you were an air traffic controller, then I can absolutely understand why you would need this language. But with the city, our property is our roads too, and our parks and our right of way. So this is written so broadly that if someone were to have a unopened bottle of wine in their car and drive down the city street, which if you live in the city of Gerhard and your employee would do, then you would be in violation of this technically. If you pulled into the in front of the city hall, again with the sealed, I'm not talking about an open container here, which is against the law, a sealed container. And, I tried to reconcile this with you know, could you read? How do you read the search of property with the prohibited conduct under A? And this is my other major issue is possession, sale or use of drugs is on page 32, section 1, and then it says prescription drugs and medical marijuana, that's separate, it's below. And then the problem with this is that it's possesses alcohol or a controlled substance. Any prescription drug is a controlled substance.
Right.
So, if someone has someone else's prescription, yeah, that would be, I mean, that's a crime. But if someone has their own prescription, that fits under this controlled substance. And in the other section, it's written as drugs. So we can't legally, that makes it, so I'm just, again, I think that this search of property was probably taken from a different form. And I understand they used the League of Oregon Cities form. And I think this was taken from a different form, and because the language doesn't track. And I think it was written for heavy equipment, someone that like running heavy equipment. That's why it says like lunch pail and locker, because if someone's got a crane and they come back from lunch and they're acting a little funny, you need to be able to. So I'm really uncomfortable with this on a lot.
Well, I can tell you, at one point I ran a jail and we could pretty much search anything and then because there were security issues there. But even then, we would hesitate to just willy-nilly search a car. We would get either written consent or we would write a search warrant just because finding whatever it is you need to find and there is just half the battle, but being able to then discipline them or follow through, you lose the ability to do that if you could legally obtain or if it's not constitutional, the manner in which you obtain it. So I think it's pretty simple just to strike anything that allows us to search. And as far as the drugs and I would say any illegally possessed drugs.
And I would just draw a distinction between possesses and consumes. If someone's consuming alcohol on city property, it's prohibited, so we're not talking about the fireman's ball. Because there's city employees, including me, consuming beer on city property during that. I mean, that's technically a violation, but having a closed bottle or beer on a city street as you're driving your car, and that makes this section so vague that it's basically unusable. And then if we actually used it and violated the person's privacy, because again, it would be selective enforcement because most of us have probably had a closed thing of alcohol on a city street.
Well, you go from the shop and go or whatever it is.
Yeah.
To your house.
Right, you're in violation of this section.
Now, and just to let you know, there are 2 other places within this book that help us handle this situation if it was to come up in other ways. Number 1, workplace inspections, right to privacy over confidentiality. It says that we can search anything that's the city-owned property. Okay?
Yeah.
Your desk, my desk, my office, and my employee vehicle if I had one. Right? So we have the ability to be able to do that. The other place that's in here is testing. If I suspect that somebody is doing drugs or inebriated, then we have rules in here that says that we can take them for testing. And that is rock solid. The probable cause issue where I'm going in and I would need to search Justine's purse, that would be very difficult to do. I would not recommend that would be something that we encounter or go through because of all the issues that could happen. So I think there are things in this book that allow us to take care of the problem.
So given those other sections, I think we could just strike this one.
Okay. So my next question is
Also, may I go back to your first question?
about seatbelts.
Page 44, third paragraph.
Page 44.
I'll read it to you. While City of Deerheart business drivers are expected to make every reasonable effort to operate the vehicle safely with due regard. Weather, road conditions, drivers are to obey all traffic laws, that's 1.
Okay.
Posted signs, signals, requirements applicable to the vehicle being operated, seatbelts are to be used in all
There you
vehicles.
go. That's why I didn't bring it up before. Okay. I
Yeah.
got it this time.
No worries.
You wouldn't even sit your lights.
No, sir.
So we're just taking out search of property? Is that just?
That will be
the
my
second?
recommendation.
Okay,
Now, which page are we on now?
page
Now-
34.
So my next question is this a requirement for city council to approve this document? How is this not fall under the realm of operational and something you guys can do independent of? I mean, you guys can make these changes and we don't have to continue to vote on it or anything. Is this just a courtesy allowing us to know what's going on? Or is this a requirement for us to approve this?
Because that part I not know for
So I
the
would
original
never do
creation
that.
of this document,
The
so.
county organization I worked at before, we made operational changes as we needed to and we didn't have to get.
Yeah, I don't think that the council's required to approve this, but I think that it's kind of been demonstrated why it makes sense to have multiple eyes on this
Right,
document,
right. No,
because we
I
all
appreciate
grab
it.
different things.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we need to come back and approve this again once these changes have been made.
Yeah, I don't know the historical reason, other than maybe it was just new.
No,
And so
I think
it
it's a
came-
good exercise for the,
Yeah.
like Peter said, for everything that we just demonstrated, but as far as approving or making further changes or whatever, I think you guys have a good start on it.
So under council options, it says that we could motion to approve the attached employee handbook as amended. So that is what I would like to do. I'd like to move to approve the attached employee handbook as amended.
Okay, my question would be, if we're approving it this way, are they then allowed to make changes to it in the future, or do they have to, I mean, since we're approving it?
Yeah, no, they can change
Yeah,
it.
this is a
So even though
legislative.
it's not changing, it's not
Correct.
looking things up like. Okay, then I will give you a second.
Any discussion? Okay, we got a motion and a second. Can I get a ayes?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Thank you very much.
Really appreciate you going through this. Thank you.
All right, now. We're going to. Oh my goodness. The Gerhart Rural Fire Protection District contract. Does anybody have any question? Or comments? I do. In the contract. The last paragraph of the first page of the contract. During the period of this contract, it is agreed the city and district shall mutually determine what person shall be fire chief. I came in and I told everybody in Chad's office at that time, I want it stricken. Because
That was today.
that was today, and you have it underlined?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. That's absolutely ridiculous that someone would come in and tell us who would be our fire chief. So, having said that,
I think that they want to mutually agree that the district board. I think the district board would like to have a say in who the fire chief is, but they're hiring the city for their fire protection.
right,
Is that something new to just this, or has that been in
No,
the past?
this has been in there for, before I was
There was
here.
nothing that triggered their desire to be involved in.
No,
these, so-
not that I know of in the past, but I think that, allowing them to participate is what we did during Chief Cono's hire. Rock Bauer was involved. We invited him to be along with us in that procedure. So I think that, and I haven't had the chance to talk to them because this was brought up today. I did leave a message for the president of the council. If you make this change, we'll take it back to the Rural Fire Protection District and clear it with them because they also have to agree and vote on this. They voted on it as it is now. They're prepared to sign it as it is now. We're gonna make this change. If you so decide, then we're gonna go back to them. But what we can do is change this so that they are participants in the search and interview process.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with them being involved in that fashion, but the city is the
But
city.
not to be a equal voting member, if you will.
Right,
So just having their input.
I
yes.
would recommend that at the least.
And not having binding arbitration is not.
Do you want to take a shot at that paragraph?
Yeah,
Which one is that?
The binding arbitration up there. Yeah, I had that whole paragraph stricken in mind. Whatever, it's just they can't be. They can't be in the city business. As far as I'm concerned.
Peter's messing around with
They
that.
form their own fire department.
Yeah, you know. Sure.
Who are these people?
They're folks that live out.
Anybody that's outside the city limits, north to the
Right, I
drain.
understand, but who's the governing body of the rural fire?
They have their own board.
Oh, they do?
They have a board, and they have a taxing entity, so they receive taxes from their property tax base. And then they turn around and contract with the city of Earhart. I mean, a pretty substantial amount of
I say
money.
they pay what, about a third of our budget
Yeah, I mean,
approximately, maybe a little bit more
it's
than that?
probably 50% almost of the fire budget. It went if you take out conflict.
I'm always gonna go with an attorney's recommendation if he says don't go with the binding arbitration, but
Right.
I personally do not, it's their fire chief, police, or their fire chief also. I think there are some real pros to us signing this. And, I would not want to get into a tit for tat with them about if we can, about things we absolutely can't live with.
well, I think that where I'm most concerned is that, getting back to like the employee handbook, and I wouldn't anticipate any issues with our fire chief or anything like that. But let's say our fire chief did something that required us to take action, including, termination. Right now, we'd be hamstrung by the district. They could say no, because it's not just a selection of it's also review, retention, use, and termination. And if they don't agree, we go to binding arbitration, and then could we even suspend the person with pay? I mean, if we're giving someone equal, if we're handing someone veto power, and that's what we're doing. So during the portion of this contract, they could say, we're gonna terminate chief. And we could say no, and he's our employee, and we're not terminating him. And then they're like, well, we're going to binding arbitration, we're gonna suspend him during that period. What are we going to do going forward? I mean, somebody needs to have the tiebreaker on these sort of things. And I get that they pay a third of the budget, and I get that they would want a say in any, either hiring someone or participating in their performance review or whatever. But having a 50-50 split when we're paying 70% and having it go to binding arbitration, and arbitration is a mediation. Arbitration is basically court with an arbitrator instead of a judge. And we're bound, and so if the arbitrator sides with them, then we're stuck, and this is, again, let's say we want to retain the person, they're like, no, we want them out. We go to binding arbitration, we lose, then we've been forced to terminate the employee that we want for reasons that we don't agree with. And it seems just very inefficient. So if they want us to listen to them and for them to participate, there's no problem with that. But again, it's our employee, not their employee, and we are. And let's say they terminated him, we disagreed, it went to an arbitration, they won, we terminated him, he sued us for wrongful termination and we're on the hook.
I'll tell you what this is all about, okay? They pay us for fire protection. Okay, they also pay forestry for fire protection. I mean, they're getting boned both ways.
Yeah.
Okay, that would be like them going to forestry and saying, we don't like your local the forest, you know, the head of the forestry department that's protecting us as far as the fire protection goes, or our land.
Right, and I understand it, now that.
So I think
now
we
that-
just strike the whole.
Right, well, now that Peter's explained it that way, I appreciate it, I just would like to make sure that the tone of our approaching to them is not adversarial.
And I don't view this as adversarial,
They're partners.
I view this as
They're partners.
the fire chief is our employee. And then they're contracting with us to provide services to them that our fire chief is supervising. And if they have issues with the provision of services, or they have other concerns, or they want to stay in a hiring process, I think that's absolutely fair, and that we need to listen to them. But only one party can have final say, and I would prefer not be an arbitrator. And I would prefer not to go to an arbitration over these issues, and so I mean, I think as respectfully as we can and letting them know we absolutely want their input, but we can't give them veto power over our employee, we just can't. We wouldn't do that with any other entity.
No, and I appreciate that, I just.
Yeah, no, I get it.
That's my concern, is that we approach it from that direction from them, that we, unfortunately, we can't do that.
So you guys are saying this contract needs to be renegotiated.
Just put out paragraph removed.
Just, if you scrap that paragraph and you approve that, and then I go to them and they agree, we're good to go.
Well, he signed.
If they disagree and they don't decide to do that, then we'll have to come back and figure out some sort of negotiation.
Yeah, but if we approve this with that taken out, and you go back to him and you say, well, this is what they approved and this is what we're willing to do, that's kind of not really being very respectful of them, I don't think.
Well, it's all on how we handle it. We do appreciate our local fire protection district. I mean, not only do they just pay this, $240,000 this year to us, they also maintain that fire station out there. They've maintained one piece of equipment. They get taxes for that. So they're actually paying a little bit above and beyond to get that protection in the community. We have a pretty good relationship with them right now. We had a good, and Justine was there as well. We had a good rapport back and forth, and that's how we'll treat this.
Okay, I'm just.
And I was at
I
their
copy
last-
that. I get
Yeah, I was
that.
at their last meeting, I didn't get anything.
Oh, yes, excuse
I
me.
was at the meeting where they discussed this, and I didn't get anything from that, and unfortunately, I did not catch that, and I didn't understand that, and
I think
I've
when
been
we-
educated now, but,
Help them
I
understand.
didn't get anything from that meeting that led me to believe it was adversarial. I just, I mean, it makes sense, if you go to them and explain to them where you just explained to me that, you know, from an HR perspective, that's just not something that we can do. This is what we can do, I think that they'll understand that.
Correct.
You know, in contracting, he who has the last say in the contract, I mean, you can change the contract any way you want. This guy's already signed it.
So they signed it as it is, but you are not, so we will go back to them with change.
Yeah, in good faith.
They have agreed that this is the way that they would like
Yeah.
to see it, but we'll have a conversation with them. We didn't really go into detail on that particular issue.
Yeah.
Well, there were
I think this
two of
is-
us that picked it up
Yeah,
as
No, it-
objection.
no, and that was a good catch, but I don't think from their perspective that they were trying to, they were just doing what has always been done. I think that they were,
Prior to going to their board, I'll go to them on an individual basis, so like that.
I don't think they were trying to slip anything underneath our radar or insert anything new, it was just what's all.
Okay, I'll work with you, but as amended.
Okay. All right, so we've got that taken care of.
Do we need to vote on this?
If you would vote to approve the contract as amended. Then we will go to them, and if they sign it, we'll be good, and then we won't have to come back to you.
Okay, then let's have a motion.
I move that we, the council approves of the contract with the rural fire protection district. It's amended. I can throw in the paragraph out, fire chief.
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? All right, passes. Moving on. Preservation and removal of tree zoning text amendments. Okay, so we got the same thing that we had earlier. But now if we have a motion to approve, we can go to discussion. If anyone feels like that's what they want to do.
I don't want to discuss.
I definitely want to discuss, sorry.
So I make a motion that we make further changes and motion to proceed as amended.
All right. Pardon me? Right, that's what she said, further changes.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I get a second, I can go to the discussion. All right, let's go to discussion. What are the changes that we're going to do? Further changes.
No, you're going to go first.
Okay. I just want to preface what I'm going to say about this with a few things. Number one, I applaud the planning commission for coming up with the permit system. I think it's absolutely a step in the right direction for our tree preservation. Nowhere mentioned in here is that mature foliage increases property values approximately 3 to 5%. So all the advantages of having trees, that's not mentioned in here anywhere, just like to add that in. And I have personally documented by photographs approximately 200 older trees that have been taken down in the city of Gerhart over the past 7 years. I have no proof of that other than the pictures that I've taken, so this would be a step in the right direction to keep track of all that. Last thing I'll say is that besides all the benefits that trees provide, the city of Gerhart is an incredibly beautiful place. And part of that beauty is because of our old growth trees. So to see them get cut down is something I would really like to not have happen. That's just my opinion. I know other people who also feel that way. Having said that, I have a couple of questions or points I'd like to make about this ordinance. Number one, all of the tree decisions being made by Chad puts an undue burden on him, first of all, and he is also not an expert in tree related things, although he has had some fair amount of experience. He's not an expert. So I think that having arborists involved is very important. I agree with Dana on that. My comment about the arborist being involved is that if you have the arborist come out who gives an opinion on a tree, and that arborist is going to get the job of cutting down the tree, that's the fox guarding the hen house, which I think is a conflict of interest. Not that I'm impugning anything to an arborist that they'll be dishonest, but when you have the arborist saying, yeah, that tree needs to come down and you're gonna pay me $500 to do that, that's a conflict of interest. So I feel like we need to look at that and maybe do something about that in this document. The second thing, and back to all decisions being made by Chad, you know, Chad, do you really want to take that on as far as being, you know, the ultimate decision maker in this? I'm just throwing that out to you, as opposed to, you know, having this run through the planning commission or having it run through a tree board of some type. I mean, there are other alternatives to you having to make all the decisions on this. I'm just throwing that out for consideration. The second thing, let me turn to the page, is nowhere in this document really, is it mentioned that pruning the tree could be an alternative to taking it down for whatever problems the tree might be presenting to the homeowner? I'd like to see some wording in there regarding alternative measures that can be taken for, quote, problematic trees, end quote. To take a tree down because it's getting some needles on your roof is, it's not a risk versus benefit kind of a scenario. So I'd like to see some wording in there about, pruning, trimming, blah, blah, blah. What else? The 38 inches in circumference, I think it's a great idea to go to the circumference measurement. It is a lot easier for people. I would really like us to see us go to the 30 inches instead of the 38 inches. That's just my input on that. To prevent mass trees being taken down. Let's see, what else? Bear with me.
That the old or
I think that's it.
That's all.
They don't cry at night.
That's a
It's
coyote.
coyotes.
Oh, coyotes, yeah,
That's coyotes.
that's
So
coyotes.
Well, I have to
Oh,
agree.
one other thing, sir. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Why?
I just have one more thing.
Yeah.
I just saw it was on the back page, sorry. Also, when you take a tree down, it affects the neighboring trees. So if you take one of these large old growth, for instance, Sitka spruce down, it will have an effect on the neighboring Sitka spruce, a deleterious effect. That's been proven scientifically, and I would like to see some wording in there regarding that as well, please. I think that's all.
What's the deal with Gary?
Well, it
That's
can kill them all.
Oh,
That's for the
These
roots.
bad things
That's for the
happen.
roots.
okay.
Just for between.
Wasn't familiar with the.
Okay.
I have a quick.
You have
No,
some?
go ahead.
I'd like to know who's gonna pay the arborist.
It says in here,
I
it's
mean-
the homeowner.
I mean, arborists are very, very expensive.
A lot of times they'll come out and give you an opinion for free.
If you're asking.
I
me,
have-
issue
I
is
have
not
to-
sure.
Is that your experience, Chad?
Not that I've seen with, where I've required homeowners, I mean, to answer your question about, how I handle this or whether or not I'm qualified, I'm not a qualified tree expert, no. I know a dead tree, I know a dangerous tree. And I know it to be dead, it's gotta be dead. I mean, obvious, no green or very little green, one branch of green and the rest of it falling apart, dangerous. Tree limbs falling on cars, property, houses, because the tree is dead. That's kind of the level I take it to. If it's below that level and it's like I ask them to go ahead and provide me with information from an arborist. And that is if they want to take a tree down in the right of way. Right, because that's where I have control. I don't have control because you can take down 5 trees on your property at any time. Once a year, right? Or 5 trees a year.
Every year.
So we do ask people to call an arborist when things are kind of on the edge and when we don't have a full understanding or when we can't tell it's not dangerous. And that has gotten better over the last few years to where people are calling more often. The rest of this would be substantial changes. We would need to probably go back to the planning commission in regards to maybe not, I mean, changing the size down from 30 inches to 30 inches, 38, that might be substantial, I'm not sure. Arborists are expensive. And I know it would take a lot more administrative work to make that happen. So then I would like, if we wanted to consider something like that and we come up with some rules, I'd like to take this back and then add a fee to the permitting process. Now, the reason that we did not add a fee, or I'm saying the planning commission, the discussion is we want people to be able to come in and do this and feel that they can put together this permit and then do the work that they needed to do in order for us to collect data. The more arduous we make it, the better we're protecting trees, but then we're not gonna have as much compliance at times. But I don't think that's a reason to say no, that we don't need to do that. But it is going to have an added cost to the city, and we're gonna have to figure out how we can find the time and the funds to be able to do that.
Did you come up with a fee for those who break law and just cut down a tree without a permit?
The council did, it's 500 per occurrence per day.
Okay, thank you.
But I didn't see that in here.
It's the penalty in the zone code.
Article 15.
Article 15, about all penalties across the zone code. I think it's mentioned in there.
But Chad,
Yes,
we know people who have taken down trees when they shouldn't have and were not fined because you're such a nice guy, right? So will that be applied or
You're
is
gonna have to
that
come up-
just gonna be?
Give me an
yes,
example of
done
that. Give me an example of that.
The lady on Summit who took down 3 old growth spruce in the riparian zone.
That's a good example. Although they were calling those dangerous, and then after the
Yeah,
fact,
she's-
we had to try to do that, but they were calling it dangerous, they were very concerned, they were asking me for weeks whether or not they should be able to cut it down. We investigated, we told them to get an arborist, and then they ended up cutting it down because the arborist told them to do that. But that's different, they were within a 50-foot riparian zone, but then they called the tree dangerous. Now we'll have a permitting process to where when they need to cut down any trees, they've got to come to us first, and we have the opportunity to get ahead of it. That was after, then they tell me it's dangerous. I can't prove it wasn't, I can't take that.
Right, so you're caught in the middle.
Yes, this permitting process as we have it here eliminates that. Mostly, I think.
Yeah, but we still have the fox guarding the hen house of the arborist that they get to come out and the arborist looks at it and says, yeah, that could be dangerous, or yeah, that's dangerous. Yeah, and then they get the business. That's a conflict of interest.
I don't
But in
disagree.
a small community like this where, arborists are not thick on the ground, that might be something you just have to, you do the best that you can do.
There was an arborist that did that quite a bit. He's no longer in business. And it's, I think that with this permitting process, we have an opportunity to step up. And if we find an arborist that's behaving badly, I think this will help us figure it out as it's written now. It's not perfect though. But this will definitely give us more opportunity.
So do we not have any access to, for instance, like a state person or a state arborist that could rule on stuff? Even maybe if it's in the riparian zone, could we tap the state?
Well, I think
arborist?
that another way of seeing it is that an arborist that says that the tree needs to go cannot be the person to take it down.
Yeah,
But we don't have any requirements as it's written now for an arborist to do that unless it's like.
And that's what usually a municipality will do, like, for example, with a tow truck driver, you'll have a pool of tow truck drivers, and you will, draw from them in a rotating cycle or whatever. And then the fee would be charged to the person, but yeah, in a small community like this, where everybody is begging for these folks to, I called an arborist to come out and just trim our trees, and it took us 3, we went through 3 before we could even find one that would come out. So that, I could see that being a real problem. However, I do agree with, if their reason, and the only reason, they're not going to, they can cut down a single tree with no problem. We're not going to question them until it becomes more than 5.
No,
And when it becomes more than 5,
from tree 1, they've got to do a permit with this.
well, I know they have to get a permit, but we're not going to deny them just arbitrarily, are we?
I'll look at it and see if the trees are on our right of way. I'll look at it and see if the tree is in the riparian area.
Okay, well, so we pay you a lot of money, God bless you. That sounds like a lot of staff time, and you're asking the citizens, the taxpayers, to absorb the cost of that. Meanwhile, you're being taken away. We're paying you a lot of money to run the city, not to run around and look at trees. So I don't think that's a good fix.
And I do look at, I do run around
He
the
does
trees
run
now.
around.
I know,
You know,
I would
they-
like, we're trying to fix a system, we don't continue and make it worse.
So we're getting into some real substantial changes.
Yeah.
And my recommendation would be that if we're gonna charge a fee that's substantial.
Yeah.
If we're going to bring it to 30 inches.
Well, hold on just a minute. My opinion, and I have not entered my opinion into any of this conversation within the planning commission or up until now, just been technical help. But my opinion is that this is a pretty big change for Gerhart. All trees that are gonna be cut on private property will have to go for a permit. And it may be expensive to start off with, and if it is, and we find that, but we get compliance, there is kind of an offshoot with that. We get more data, we get more compliance. I'm not sure how much time this is gonna take. I don't think it's gonna take that much time, and I'm prepared to say that, let's give it a shot. At least as it's, written here, to start with, this is my opinion. And then see how this goes. And we'll monitor the situation. If the time requirements and the cost requirements become too great, I'll come to you and make a recommendation to say that we need to add some fees or to change the way we do this. And then at that time, after we have a little bit of time under our belts and we start seeing how this works, you can add more restrictions or take less restrictions away as well. But this is a pretty good start from my perspective, and I think we can manage it to see how it goes.
Well, okay, and I'm going to respectfully disagree with you, because in a small community like this, there are two ways to get removed from somebody's Christmas card list. And that's number one, to approve this, and number two is to get out in front of this and block this. This is going to create tree wars. I believe that once people may not have been involved because they haven't really heard about it or learned about it. But I can guarantee you that once you start affecting somebody's ability to change their own property, they're gonna have problems. So,
Yeah,
but setting that aside, there are some other substantial changes I think that need to be made to this. It's not ready to go. They need to do a better definition, from my perspective, the definition of trees. It needs some work, like the demonstration I gave you, whether we're gonna be talking about just the largest branch circumference, or whether the total circumference at 4 feet, you need to explain that to me. I need to be able to read that as a layman and understand. So that we're not setting them up for failure. I do think that that there's going to be some cost in staff time in reviewing these. You're saying that the purpose of this is tree tracking, however, we're not going to track the trees that you cut down for a business permit. So you haven't created any kind of a device that requires them to report how many trees they cut down, so I think that negates your argument that you're doing tree tracking. So I think that should be part of the discussion. And I also think that they're part of the consideration of when somebody can cut down a tree is whether it's an invasive species. I think that should be an allowable reason for somebody to cut down a tree.
according to the Oregon invasive species list, there are no trees on the list at all.
Okay, well,
So Oregon does not consider any tree to be invasive. That's something that I learned when we were,
Well, I just read that hawthorn can be considered an invasive species.
Can be, but in the state of Oregon, there's no trees on the invasive species list. That's something that we went through, at least there wasn't when we did the beach dune vegetation project.
That was noxious weeds.
And it was also, and that's.
And holly is a bush, not a tree.
It's actually considered a tree.
Well, it could be defined as a tree, I have something, on my yard.
I've got a holly tree that's 9 inches across.
Yeah, it's a tree. Well, at least
They can
according to
turn trees.
Google, it's a tree.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was kind of interesting to us because we were talking, well, aren't some trees considered noxious that would be on the beach dune vegetation? The state of Oregon, and the people that were assisting us came back and says, no, there aren't any trees on the noxious.
Well, I think we're going to, it
And then-
needs some substantial change.
And then the other question that you had was, tracking on buildings permits. We would have the ability to do that because we require them to put the number of trees that are on the plot plan
Okay.
prior to approval. So we can track that and get some data, but I didn't think about doing that before until you mentioned it. So that was good.
Okay, so why don't you withdraw your motion? We'll bring this
I
back
withdraw
to the February meeting. with the ideas already written out,
I-
okay? Does everyone,
What could maybe some of the things that have been talked about be written down by Garrett and brought back to us, or? I mean, can you-
Yes, and Garrett's here. Garrett, I'm sorry. Did you have
Yeah.
anything?
Yeah, so I'm happy to basically take the minutes. I've been taking notes, summarize the issues that I've heard you guys talk about. They're diverse. Some of them are relatively technical, like we could fix them tonight in discussion potentially. Some imply a real reorientation of our goals and what we're trying to accomplish here, or what it seemed the planning commission was trying to accomplish, and that certainly would require more discussion. And that's where, the planning commission's work was minimalist, I would say. When you're trying to get on the same page about goals, that's where like some more substantial fact finding and a planning process can actually help, in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. If we're trying to protect more trees, for example, by lowering the DBH requirement, we could keep going with that discussion in a lot of different ways. Are there certain kinds of trees? Is DBH what really matters? Or is tree canopy what matters? Or are there certain kinds of trees that are really cherished that matter and have some or deserving of protection? But I think that at least bringing back to you all a summary of some of the issues you've raised, at least some solutions for the relatively simple and technical matters that you discussed, and a couple of options of how to move forward on the ones that are a little bit more complex might allow us to get resolution within a couple of meetings, and it's also up to you whether you want to send it back to the planning commission for them to reconsider their goals and work through this, or if you want to take it up from here and
we're
work on it.
taking it up from here. We don't need to go back to the planning commission. I think when you rewrite this stuff, we'll be able to discuss it in February and come to a conclusion at that time.
All right.
Now, I'm going to ask for any council concerns at 9:40 in the evening.
We're gonna hate.
I am. I'm starting with Preston. Are you got any?
Any concern that I have to add, I've expressed already.
Rita,
I have no concerns.
Dana,
I have no concerns, I'm willing to share tonight.
okay,
Okay,
Karen.
I'm really sorry, but I'm reading through this tree ordinance stuff. I got to the riparian vegetation section that lists the Neocoxy Creek, Mill Creek. Does not list the estuary. Why is that not listed in there? Please.
Because it's not considered riparian,
Yes,
not by the city of Gerhart.
and we went through all this with the planning commission and Carol Connell, and she assured, and we said, no, the estuary needs to have the 50-foot riparian protection zone, and it needs to be in there, and she assured me it would be put in.
That
So,
would be your choice to do. It was noticed in the comprehensive plan as being the estuary having protections, but it was never codified
right,
in the there was never anything that was codified in the zoning ordinance itself. So it was a mention to say that we shall protect, that there are no protections other than for riprap and that sort of thing. It does not have the same 50-foot riparian area. Is that what you recall?
yes.
Okay.
Thank you. So, we have it in the comprehensive plan, but we don't have it in the ordinance.
Correct.
So that's not good. If it's specifically in the comprehensive plan and it's not in our ordinance, we need to have it in our ordinance.
Yeah, I don't, well, I'll leave it to the professionals.
So the comprehensive plan
It's aspirational.
I know what's aspirational.
The good thing is I made this very argument in a brief to Luba that I turned in yesterday. So the comprehensive plan is the vision and values of the place. It doesn't actually change use or any new use or prohibit any old use. It's like the, so just because it says something in the comprehensive plan doesn't mean that someone can or can't do anything. It's the adoption of the code that then gives them the clear and objective criteria. So if you want to codify that in a clear and objective manner that people can understand, it's within your purview. Otherwise, it's kind of noted, but it has no legal effect.
So you can write an ordinance, send it to Peter to make sure that it's legal and bring it to the council.
Well, it doesn't have to be written, it would just go in that section where they list where the riparian zones are, and it'd just be included in that section. I mean, it's like
Well,
two words.
I mean, that would be a change in land use that we'd have to publicly notice, and we'd have to adopt via hearings.
Sharon, the Niacotchee Creek is a stable environment. The estuary is a changing environment. I mean, in my lifetime, that thing, I mean, first of all, there were never any pine trees down there. You know, and now if you go down there after the wave action, you see that there's pine trees down that have fallen over the bank. So I mean, it's changing all the time, whereas the Niacotchee Creek here, I mean, apart from being silted in, you know, but we used to be able to take rafts from Gun Club Road, go underneath the bridge here and go underneath the bridge at 13th Street. You know, pull on over to Seaside.
There's a lot of downed trees in Niacotchee right now.
Yeah, I know.
I haven't been there before. So it's not exactly a stable environment, I wouldn't say.
Well, no, but what I'm saying is you know, the trees alongside the banks and everything like that have been there for generations.
Okay, well, if we're going to change and have to have public hearings, then we need to set that up. Okay, and we need to document that you have a concern in that. All right?
Because that'll need to be acknowledged by DLCD.
Gotcha. But now it doesn't have to go through planning commission or does it? City.
I'm like 9:45 at night isn't the time for me to like go through the technical land use. What we need to do here. I have some concerns given
We'll
the
find out more.
instability of the situation of how we're going to map it, frankly. And I think that, and I remember us, you, me and Carol, trying to articulate a standard that would be legally enforceable. And I think the reason it's not in there is because the comment that you made, and we also don't know how those trees got there. There's a rumor that a guy used to like to stroll at night with seeds. Anyway, but yeah, we need to come up with the bright line test, and it's going to be difficult. But if that's a council priority, we can see what we can come up with.
Okay, do you have any other concerns? Okay, well, thanks for sharing that. And we'll see what we can do about that possibly in the near future. Now, I'll take a motion.
I'll give you a motion to end the meeting.
I need a second.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed can go home anyway. All right, thank you, council.
Thank you so much.
Yes, that would be perfect.